I can't pronounce his name.
Okay, here we go.
All right,
We can start admitting, please.
sure.
There we go. I don't have the admit feature, so you must be doing that, Mike, please. Uh-oh, discussion is spelled wrong. Bill.
Oh, gosh. We'll cancel the meeting and we'll start again next week, okay? Oh,
Hey, Glenn, how you doing, sir?
Okay, how are you? Discussion is spelled wrong?
I just fixed it. Usually it's Gualtieri that's spelled wrong.
Well, that's true.
yeah, yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, is that Alec?
That's me. Is that Rob? Yep.
Yes, it is.
How you
Yeah.
doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Belinda.
Hi, Belinda. Welcome.
Rob, thank you for agreeing to do this. Appreciate it.
Quite welcome.
Why don't we take,
Alec, do you pronounce your last name Amini?
That's it. Exactly
Oh,
right.
Fantastic. That's how I've been saying it since I met you, and I'm thinking I don't know if I even ever heard anybody else say it, including you.
Oh yeah, I've heard it all. You know,
Yeah,
all
I'll
kinds
bet.
of pronunciation.
Can you still see the agenda? Because I can't see gallery view. I don't see Belinda. Or Glenn.
Yes. Yeah, I can see it. My camera is off because I'm eating lunch right now.
Oh, okay. There we go then. Fine.
Okay.
Lovely.
why don't we take down the, or do you want to leave the agenda up or what?
Yeah.
I
Or you
leave
can or you can reduce the space for the agenda so you can get more little squares in, because that's what I'm doing to get everybody in.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, I can only participate over the phone, so I just have to listen to you guys and Rob, everybody.
All right.
Okay. Well, we always leave the agenda up while Bill reads it or talks about it, just so people can refer to it and make notes if they want on names or whatever. So it is like 1 minute till. Do we have anybody else in the waiting room?
Somebody just came, yeah.
I don't want this. And I don't want that.
Just you could see I'm a real person, so.
I can see you, Belinda. I can see you loud and clear.
Okay.
Betty Ann is with us. How are you, Betty Ann?
Have we lost the agenda?
No?
Yep. Still
Okay.
there.
All righty.
Can you give me your thing?
Just shortly.
Eddie, how are you doing? Oh, I'm good.
Already.
I got 159.
One.
I am very confused.
So, approximately, how many people signed up?
Well, we have a problem today because Judd hasn't been available to us because of a death in the family. So I honestly don't. I haven't looked at the RSVPs. He usually posts that for us.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
All right, I got 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and start. And my name is Bill Porter, and I'll be the moderator. And I welcome everybody, and I'm coming live from Richmond, Virginia, where it's very pretty outside. It's been a great week, and I hope you guys have had a good week. Anyway, you can look at the agenda, and of course, I welcome everybody. And then we're going to have Mike Foxworth talk. We had a member pass away, and we're going to talk about him for a few minutes. And then we have an introduction of our speakers, and we have two Pedorthists who are going to speak to us about shoes and fitting and their agenda. And then we have our break. And then for any new attendees, we break at 3 and have a 5-minute stretch. And then then we'll introduce any new attendees, and then open discussion. Then we'll have a wrap up. And then we go to overtime. Anyone have a question? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Foxworth, who's going to talk about Bob Mobley. Mike, you're up.
Hi. We had I'm basically kind of sort of read this. This is about Bob Mobley. I call him, well, only Bob. People think some people use his name Robert. This is a fairly recent photo of him. It was in a Washington Post obituary from last Sunday. He had PN, as does his widow, Lynn. Lynn couldn't come today. And we owe Bob and Lynn a big debt, both of them. He died this past March. He was in his late 80s. He didn't die of PN. It did affect him. It's walking and all, but basically he lived a long time, and people get old, and he was he was still working, and he had an appointment, and the garage door broke, and they couldn't get his cars out, so he went to get his old car, his old manual transmission truck that he loved, and he made a mistake, and the car went up in the wrong direction, and he bumped his head, and he figured it was nothing, but it turned out to be something, and he ended up with a fatal stroke. He was a very prominent architect mainly in the DC area, but he had buildings that he designed lots of places in the world. They both became members of Steve Klitzman's in-person group that used to meet in Annandale, Virginia. I think it was about 2016 they started coming. May have been 2017. I'm trying to let's see. I'm trying to let people in here. Okay. They didn't come every week because he liked working, but I met with them privately several times to talk about the issues that peripheral neuropathy was facing, especially its lack of public awareness, especially the fact that none of the newspapers, for instance, the Washington Post, had ever had an article about PN. It's arguably, I would argue, it's one of the biggest health issues the country has, perhaps arguably the most expensive one we have, in terms of what it does to people and what it costs the country in terms of losing people at a relatively early age. So Lynn, Bob's wife, started talking about writing a story about how 6 or 7 years earlier, in 2010, they they had been out hiking among the volcanoes in Italy, and they suddenly noticed the balance and strength issues associated with PN. They had no idea what was going on. They'd never heard of PN, and Steve Klitzman and several other group members, and I guess Robert himself, they helped Lynn with some of the factual aspects, and she wrote an article, and it got published in the Washington Post. And this is the picture of Lynn and Bob up on some mountain somewhere in Italy. Maybe that's Vesuvius, I don't know. That's the picture that came out in the article. There's the article. I'll put it in chat here soon. And here's the headline. My athletic husband stumbled. He was tired. He had a disease. Just a second. Let me let somebody in here.
I don't have that option. I'm sorry. I could help you.
This is those who just joined. I'm talking about Robert Mobley. His obituary was published last Sunday in the Washington Post. My athletic husband stumbled. He was tired. He had a disease we'd never heard of. But the article got some of the attention that peripheral neuropathy deserves. It needs a lot more, but I think that's really up to us as much as anybody else. But that's just the beginning. Bob had a friend. His friend had a relatively rare disease with a small foundation. That foundation got its members to lobby Congress, and Congress made that disease a candidate for funding through a DoD health research program. In other words, money was out, it wasn't directly allocated, but it made it possible to get health research funded through a DoD program for this small disease by going directly to doing some lobbying and going directly to Congress. And Bob said, maybe we can do that. So time went on, and a little bit of time went on, and then we, that is Robert, Steve Klitzman, and I met with Lou Mazaway and a representative of the foundation at Lou's office in Washington, D.C., and Robert pitched his case. Now, years later, after the foundation hired a lobbyist and a lot of members of support groups wrote to Congress, PN is now getting research done via that DoD program. This is what Bob and Lynn have done for us. Bob died, like I said, in March. And he also kicked in some money sometimes when we were trying to get the group going. So I just wanted to point out that, hey, somebody did this. We all need to I think the lesson, we need to think about what we can do to help. He really helped us all.
Thank you, Mike, for that. I think it was really important that we remembered his work and his support for our disease and getting the awareness raised. And now, recently, the foundation had, during May, $100,000 challenge for research money. And I was hoping Lou Mazaway would be here today to tell us whether they reached their challenge or not, or whatever. But we're grateful. I put both our website and the foundation's website in the chat so that people can click on them. And later, if you want to put yours in, Glenn, or now, these are websites that you might want to consult. And I'm going to stop talking and let Mike introduce Rob, or our speaker today.
Now it's several months ago. Actually, I guess almost 6 months ago, I started the process of trying to get a brace. I've had many members tell me that they've gotten a brace for their braces for their legs, and they were wonderful, and how helpful they were. And so I said, well, okay, let me see check this out. And so I after many months of hemming and hawing and going through several steps, I got this. Okay, well, if you just looking at it, you say, that looks kind of big. I don't think it's going to fit in my shoes. And so I tried to find a store and eventually went to the Shoe Fly store that we have in McLean, Virginia, and asked to see if I could have a shoe. And in the process, a very helpful salesperson who found me these shoes, and it just so happened that there was a Pedorthist there. I don't know if he's there all the time, but he was there, and we talked a little bit and about the problems involved in fitting shoes to brace the yeah, big feet. And we've been married a few years, and I asked Alec if he could come talk to us, and then he said fine. He agreed, and now he brought in their trainer, and his name is Rob Orr, or Robert Orr, and he's on the screen here. And we invited him to come and talk to us about, their perspective on what it means to have shoes, and especially shoes when you, well, not just especially, but including the problems of fitting braces. So, Rob, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Certainly my thoughts, prayers are with the Mobley family and all the friends and the people we touched. I'm really glad that you read that obituary. I have myself began a relationship with a local group here from State College. We met at Mount Nittany Hospital, which is State College's hospital at Penn State there. They met quarterly, but I would go over twice a year. And they had a means of meeting through Zoom more than that, but they actually met in person quarterly there at the hospital. And I would go there. And I had worked with a lady that had discovered similar circumstances, that she had peripheral neuropathy. And so she said, I know a guy, and they brought me in. And I grew very close with many of them just as customers, and also visiting them, twice a year. And so through the last 20 years of doing that, I've had this very same thing with some of those great people. And it's interesting when it cannot be overstated how big of a problem this is, and how much awareness can make a huge difference. A few statistics. Now it depends on what statistical group of studies you're drawing metadata from, but the numbers are all very close. So we know those are the numbers, and some are a percent higher or lower. But from this particular study that I'm referencing, it's a more recent study drawn out of 22 publications. But the big thing that we're trying to prevent with shoes, we do want to aid ambulation, allow people to walk better, have better balance. All of these things are goals, and there's many goals. But primarily the weighted mean of re-amputation, once you have an amputation, okay, within 1, 3, and 5 years respectively, you have almost about 13.5% within a year get a second amputation. Now that's not a big number, but it's a very short time period, so it makes it a big number. And 30% in 3 years. So 1/3 of people who would lose a digit or a transmetatarsal, which is through the middle of the foot, amputation would then have a second, and it'd be on up the leg as it goes. 50% respectively with significant higher rates associated with major amputation. They're even higher. So 50% within 5 years have a second amputation. Okay. The mortality rate, okay, for that second amputation, the full foot amputation, which is usually what that is, not always. Sometimes people have a very small amputation, then a kind of intermediate, and then they have a full foot. Once you have a full foot, the leg comes next, but the mortality rate for losing your foot is 5 years. There are healthy people who lose their feet and then are no longer with us in 5 years. And so it's very important, I don't think, to look at it as a reaction. We don't want to react to this problem. We want to get ahead of it before it ever comes. We don't want to look at our feet and say, I have a problem, I need to do this. And it's really what Bob did, Mobley. He just simply had some balance issues and strength issues, and instead of ignoring it, like probably a lot of men would do, just I'm tough and I'll move on, he decided to find out what was going on. And he lived pretty long, probably taking care of his feet. So what I want to really go through with you is the big, I think I just finished, I taught one of the classes, but there was the Pedorthist Foot Care Association has training classes, about 2 hours long. And I did one, and many other people did other ones, but it was all about peripheral neuropathy, but it was also geared towards diabetic peripheral neuropathy. Now, we know much of PN is idiopathic. It's not diabetic. We don't know what's coming from. It could be from a lot of things. You know, somebody was in Vietnam, Agent Orange, or radiation from cancer treatment or whatever. But with peripheral neuropathy, the number one thing we can do is redistribute the pressures on the bottom of the foot. If I would take my arm and push on it like that and hold that for about 10 seconds here, when I let go, there's a little white mark that quickly turns tan again. Okay, I've been kayaking, so I have a little bit of suntan. So when I let off, it's white, but within seconds, it turns dark again. The reason it was white is because blood was unable to get to that part of my skin. Okay, so what does the body do? The body thinks, we got to get those veins, that blood flow happening again. So it starts a hyperkeratosis. It grows the skin, the outer skin, the kind that doesn't get blood, the kind that sloughs off. It grows that very rapidly to try to get the veins away from what's pushing it. And we call that a callus. Calluses are caused by pressure, okay? So what happens when you have a callus on the bottom of your foot is underneath that callus, it gets a lot of shear, okay? When you walk around, that callus, that little hump on the bottom of your foot is being pushed forward, pushed backward, pushed sideways. When we turn to get a can of soup, when we turn back, when we hunch over to open up the can of soup, when we walk across to pour it into the bowl, put it into the microwave, we're shifting all over the place, and that callus is shifting all over the place. And underneath it, you can develop an ulcer. And once you have an ulcer, it can lead to amputation. So I'm really going to spend my time talking to you about what we do to take pressure on the bottom of the foot and make your foot a total contact of even pressure on the ground. Okay? And is everybody with me so far? I'm not speaking too fast, or sometimes I have to step back and maybe ditch a couple medical terms that nobody knows, but I forget that sometimes. But I want to do a quick little 101 on biomechanics. We live in a three-dimensional world, and what that means is we can move this way, okay? In medicine, they call that the sagittal plane. We can move this way, and in medicine, they call that the transverse plane, across. And then we can also move this way, okay? And that's most obviously seen from the front or back, so that's called the frontal plane, okay? And if we do all of them together, we have flow, okay? Those are the people that can dance. I can't. I'm the more linear dancer, but that everybody laughs at. But that flow is all three motions combined together. So the University of Los Alamos, I'm trying to think of the University of California, Los Alamos, I believe is what it was, had a gait lab that was none other in 1993. they did a test of all the athletic shoes on the market and found out the best athletic shoe out there offloaded 13% of the pressure from the foot. So 87% of the pressure was still there. And they found that the number one thing that offloads pressure from the bottom of your foot to prevent callousing was proper biomechanics. Have you ever seen somebody bow-legged? They stand on the outside of their feet. Have you ever seen anybody knock knee? They stand on the inside of their feet, okay? Sometimes children, when they're learning how to walk, will walk on their toes, and you have to try to correct them to get them down on their heels. They'll toe walkers. Their pressure is in the front of their feet. So if it's in the front of the feet, it's this plane, the sagittal plane. If it's in the back or heel of the feet, it's the sagittal plane. If it's the inside, it's the frontal. If it's the outside, it's the frontal, okay? And then we also have duck-footed and pigeon-toed, which is the transverse plane. So our job is to get kind of underneath that foot and maybe a little bit beside that foot, and through all three planes of motions, get that foot balanced to the ground, that when the weight of your body pushing against it, 50% down one leg, 50% down the other, if you don't have a leg length discrepancy, and that's an issue that we'll treat and I'll talk about. We want to get the foot balanced, and we want total contact of that foot to be even, so that person can remain active, hiking, doing whatever they like to do, and not develop calluses. And if they do develop calluses, we'll find that they become more sedentary. They avoid activity, and that's not good at all. And so what I want to start to do now that I've given my little biomechanics presentation is to begin to talk about how we do that, okay? And so I'll start with a very simple categorization of what we do, and then I'll go specifically into each one of those categories and end the presentation there. So this will take a little bit of time. This is the fun part, maybe more so for ladies. I have some shoes everywhere here, and I might jump out and grab a shoe and jump back. But we do that with shoes, okay? Some shoes tilt you this way, tilt you that way, tilt you back, or tilt you forward, okay? That's important. I just waited on a lady before I walked into this room to jump on with you that had a lot of pain in the front of her foot, okay? I put her in a shoe that had a low heel drop, and she walked around and said, I don't feel the pressure on the front of my foot. That's a very simple solution, okay? But her going out and buying a pair of shoes anywhere, A, she doesn't know what shoes go up or down, and B, probably 95% of the places or 90% of the places out there, the person selling them to you, if there's a person selling them to you, doesn't know either, okay? At the Shoe Fly, we try to have all staff understand these aspects. And when the staff knows to lower the heel and they have some success, that's terrific. Now, they are also trained that if they have anything that's slightly involved, it's a little more involved, that they'll turn it over to a pedorthist, or at least have a pedorthist enter the conversation to at least check treatment, if not recommend it as well. So that's a common practice. Alec will find it at his store that he has employees. Maybe they're a part-timer and they've been trained well, but they'll come to him and say, Alec, I did this and this person has this problem. Can you check me? Question.
Rob, excuse me, could you please define pedorthist and exchange and the opposite, the podiatrist? What is
okay?
So
pedorthist is the Latin word for foot nerd. I'm joking. Okay, a pedorthist, yeah, a pedorthist would be like a pharmacist to a podiatrist, but also like a pharmacist to an orthopedist. This is a heel lift for a leg length discrepancy, so that they don't go to the foot doctor, they go to the hip doctor, who's an orthopedic bone doctor, and he says you need a heel lift, and they come in. So we have, and also PTs will send people in. We general practitioners, though, they tend to be much less educated about biomechanics, but they'll figure, I know somebody in there knows something. So we do a lot of outreach to get our awareness of who we are and what we do out there, so that we work as a team with the medical community. We're somewhat on the bottom, but we tend to spend the most time and do the most treatment. So I guess the first shall be last, the last shall be first. But we're on the bottom, but we're kind of on the top of the interaction with the patient. We're reading a script, we're filling a script. We do not diagnose. I can tell you, I could bet my next 5 years paycheck that I know somebody has this or plantar fasciitis or peripheral neuropathy or whatever, but I don't tell them that. I simply say, you have to go to an expert, not for legal reasons, but for ethical reasons. I am not trained like they're trained. Even if I know what they need, I need them to see that professional, that doctor, the one who is legally allowed to write a prescription, to come back. We treat people without prescription, but if I have somebody that has an ulceration, I will not treat it. I will send them to either a wound clinic, at least a podiatrist that can send them somewhere, or even himself possibly treat it, herself. I would do that. So yeah, that's the difference between a pedorthist and a podiatrist. Yeah.
Thank you.
Doctor pharmacist, just think of it that way, but for the foot.
Excellent.
Great. And so I'm going to get into some of our treatments here, and I'm going to start right at the surface, bottom surface of the foot, and what we do, and that would be inserts, orthotics, and bracing. I'm not going to show any big braces. We actually refer that brace person out to a local place here. I think most of our stores have a local place we prefer, but sometimes we'll send them. I can cast for a brace that goes up 5 inches above the ankle, according to my scope of practice from the American Board of Certification in Orthotics and Prosthetics. And so I can go 5 inches above the ankle. But if somebody does something 20 times a week and I do it once every other week, I would much rather them do it. And so that's why we don't do that. We do what we do a lot, and they don't do it, and they do what we don't do. And so I do refer that out. But starting at the very bottom of the foot, this is a foot insert that you see here. But to the general public, you would pick this up and you would squish it and say, oh, that feels kind of good. But there's more to it than that. This particular insert is actually higher on this side than it is on the outside, okay? So it's going to take that person's foot and straighten it out. So if they're leaning in and they're pushing really hard on that arch, there's a bone there that gets pushed into the ground, it falls in, that actually lifts it up. They call that a varus post, but it's just a wedge, and it goes into the heel. So it's a rear foot varus post. We also, in this orthotic, have a flare right here. It's not like an arch. The arch kind of goes through the middle, but this one's really flared out, you see there. It's an odd shape. That is actually meant, a lot of people that have peripheral neuropathy also will begin to lose communication with the small intrinsic muscles of their feet. Those muscles will grow weak. As it grows weak, the arch will fall. So this right here is the bone I was talking about, the navicular bone, okay? It's right here. I'm going to turn it sideways for this reason. This is also the navicular bone, sticking way out. You see that right there. This right here is the navicular bone on somebody whose foot is dropping because the muscles in their feet no longer have any strength, okay? This is the bone in the healthy foot, the same bone, completely tucked in, locking the arch. Think of it as the keystone of a bridge. What happens if you take the keystone of a bridge and pull it out? The bridge collapses, and that's what happens. So we have pressure here, and if that pressure continues, the foot will go outward like a duck foot in the transverse plane. And we have, some of you've probably heard of this term if you've had other speakers on, but it's called a Charcot foot. It's the worst kind of thing that can happen, usually diabetics, but anybody with peripheral neuropathy can have this collapse and have this Charcot foot, very difficult to treat. So we like to keep somebody who does not have that foot foot had that condition, who's headed towards that condition, I want to tilt them up and I want to cradle. I want to just cradle that navicular bone so that it doesn't drop and so their foot doesn't tilt in. So if they walk around on these for the next 5 years versus not walking around on these for the next 5 years, then they're going to be far better off. This is a stronger version of it. You can kind of see the wedge is a little more prominent, and this is a little stiffer and harder. I need somebody that has some flexibility in their foot to do this. Somebody with arthritis cannot stand that hard of an arch, but some people can, and we would use something with a stiffer material. So that's dealing with somebody that rolls in. The lady that I just waited on is 82. I would not have guessed she was 72. I would have guessed literally her in her 60s, and she was 82. Very spry, but as I said earlier, had pressure right on the ball of her foot right here, okay? And so she got what's called a metatarsal pad. You see this circle, teardrop circle right here? What that does is it takes the palm, pushes on it, and pushes the bones away from the ground. It re-arches the front of the foot. Where your toes are, you have an arch that can actually collapse. And when it collapses, the toes draw back. They call those hammer toes. This looks a little better. The front of your foot has an arch and where the toes are, and it can break down. And when it does, it draws the toes back. And then we have hammer toes that go up and touch the top of the shoe. If I put a metatarsal in there before that becomes arthritic or fixed, I can actually bring them back down and keep them down. You know, you could wear this I actually wear this. I get a pinched nerve in my foot, so I use this to get rid of that. I ran a lot of marathons and that kind of developed over the years. But I actually use that metatarsal pad for the forefoot. So here's another thing. If I have somebody coming in that has a callus, okay, and the callus is right here. If I put this behind that callus where there is no pressure, I offloaded the pressure here and moved it to here and also spread it out. So that callus begins to diminish. And they said, you know, I used to go, I don't know if you'll see this, but I have a callus right here on my ring finger. I think you can see it. That callus right there. That callus comes from me wearing a wedding ring and playing tennis at the same time. I'm left-handed. And so when I play tennis, I'm actually pushing my ring against my hand and I then have a callus. So if I were to put pressure behind it and lift it up, it would no longer have the pressure. And the callus, you'd end up going to the doctor every 6 months to get it removed, the foot doctor, instead of every 6 weeks to get it removed. And again, where there's not a callus, there's almost no chance that you're going to end up with an ulceration. And the ulceration leads to amputation. I gave you the scary statistics on amputation. So we want to treat the mild callus, or even just somebody says, I have peripheral neuropathy. The doctor told me to come in here. Their feet are completely healthy. They're healthy. But other than this condition of not being able to feel their feet. And so the other thing that happens with PN as time goes on and you feel less and less, in the beginning of PN, sometimes you'll have the tinglies and you'll have the hyper sensation and you'll want your shoes big. But as you lose feeling, you lose the feeling of the shoe. So everything feels too big, so you keep buying it smaller and smaller. And that's something that we really have to address on the shoe end of it. So I mentioned that I had a stiffer orthotic. Okay, we call that functional. It functions, it lifts it up. And then we have what we call a more accommodative, or a little softer, but still functional. And then we have a complete accommodative. This is a person with a very arthritic foot. You can fold this up and put it in your pocket. But what I do with these is I actually heat them up in an oven. I have you stand on them. And then when you step off of them, I have a picture of your foot as if you stepped in clay. Like when you went outside barefoot as a child and you ran around and stepped in the mud and you looked at your footprint, I have your footprint. This is called a TCO, a total contact orthotic. And so that's what we do for a lot of the severe callousing that we don't have the ability to move the joints. The joints are arthritic. Moving them would only create more problems. What I then do to some of these diabetic or peripheral neuropathy total contact is I'll heat this up where the callus is, and that's my thumb. I'll push my thumb into it and lift it off, and then I have a little bit of a crater so that it hangs rather than pushing against, if it's severe enough. I can also go to the bottom of that and carve that out. Now, this is nobody's foot. This is I used this last week to train somebody on how to use a grinder. So I did all the corrections. This looks like the worst foot in the world, but I had them do everything. And then I can also offload, if it's a first metatarsal or the big toe bone, I can offload it there, you know, on the bottom. That's all cut out, okay? I can do a little bit on the heel. That doesn't have as much. I can also add a foam pad to the arch to take pressure off of this and pressure off of the heel, because I'm putting it into the arch. The arch is usually pretty healthy because it hasn't spent your entire life on the ground. And so I do that even simply with insoles that come with shoes. This is a cushion support that came with a Brooks running shoe. It's just very thin. There's not a lot to it. But this person, I can just put a little bit of an arch on there, and I can even put the Varus wedge that we talked about earlier on there to try to tilt them in any direction I want to go. So with that, I mentioned the lady that I had that had the 4-foot pressure, and I can put a little pad on there. I can also go to the back of this, and I can peel any one of these off and alleviate the callus, instead of actually having to go back to my grinder and grinding it off, okay? And so these are pre-made, but these are custom in the sense they come in lots of different corrections. This correction is the one I wear, but I don't remove anything because I have no calluses. But I can remove any of these calluses. We also sometimes remove all 3 of these if the foot is rolling out. Because if it's rolling out and I remove all 3 of these, guess what's going to happen? It's going to roll back in again. And again, I'm putting the weight in the middle of the foot, not to the outside, not to the inside, not to the front, not to the back. Spreading it all out as even as I can get it on the bottom of their foot to protect that foot, that foot that lacks sensation. I started I didn't finish a thought earlier and it just came back to me. When we develop peripheral neuropathy, and we kind of have a hypersensitive stage, but then we start to lose all this feeling and we don't have feeling anymore, we tend not to adjust. Sometimes when I'm talking to somebody, you'll see me standing. If I'm standing, I'll be like this. And after I talk for a while, I'll go like this. And then I'll be talking for another 5 minutes and I'll go back like this. I don't know I'm doing that, but what I'm doing is my foot gets tired, so I go to the next foot without even thinking about it. Well, if you have neuropathy and you're not feeling that, you're not adjusting to that extra pressure. So just everyday life tends to beat up your feet more because your subconscious is not, there's not pain communicating to your subconscious to say, don't do this, don't do that, or move over here, move over there, because that hurts. And so we tend just to stand and we don't feel our feet, but there's all this pressure. It should be this pain. So we do this as this looks like a funny kind of thing, but sometimes when we have a heel issue, callusing, we can actually put that right into a shoe and offload the very middle there. We sometimes use these as horseshoes on the bottom as well if we have a really bad bony prominence on the bottom of the foot. And then this is a metatarsal bar that I can just put on the top of the shoe. This is not the right, this is a left and this is a left and this is a right, but it would actually look like this. But I would put that on again to offload the front of the foot. So those are some little things that we can do extra. Here's another example of a metatarsal pad that's much smaller that we can put wherever we want to try to target the callus and offload it. And so let me move on to shoes here. And if you have a question about biomechanics or these orthotics, this total contact concept, jot it down or try to remember it, and we'll get to that as soon as we finish up with our shoes here. So
You can
as
put
I
it in the
said,
chat if you want to remember it. You can type it in the chat.
perfect. Yep, that really helps. So there are all kinds of shoes. I'm going to deal with athletic shoes, but I will show you some shoes that look a little nicer. But athletics are where it's at. That's what people are wearing as everyday shoes, and they're the most protective footwear that we have primarily. There are some shoes that look like Herman Munster shoes that are very protective too. But again, we are in my goal is to have people who are at the very beginning of their journey along with this disease to stay in the beginning and not to progress. And so we want to stop the progression. And so shoes come in 3 categories, okay? They come in what's called neutral cushion. That's for the person that kind of stands with a medium to high arch and rolls out a little bit, or just stays in the middle, but they don't roll in. Then we have what's called stability shoes. Stability shoes are built up like this one is right here, usually. Okay, I got a better example of that. These lines right here, the zebra stripe, is actually a piece of plastic that holds the foot out. Because this person rolls in, if I put this shoe on them, they roll out. I may not even need an orthotic. But if I do, I have a better supported shoe to support that orthotic for the stability patient. They also have what's called motion control, okay? And in the motion control shoe, we have big pieces of plastic here on both sides of the shoe, and they actually connect underneath this outsole, and they make like a device that looks like this that your foot sits down in, and it locks you from going out or going in. And these are really feet that are not functioning. They're functioning very poorly or not functioning well at all. And we would recommend what's called a motion control shoe. The name says it all, motion control. So those are the 3 types of shoes that we use for that. But some of those shoes, I'll bring this back, like this one, the heel sits 12 millimeters higher than the front of the foot, okay? Now, many of you probably heard the word pronation or supination. We can see pronation is when the foot rolls in, supination is when the foot rolls out. But the truth is that word, if it's only rolling in, would be called eversion, but because it's rolling in, leaning back, and toeing out, those 3 motions are called pronation. If it's rolling out, it tends to go forward and in toe. Those 3 motions are called supination. So sometimes you wonder, why would you want to push somebody forward? Well, if they have pronation and their arch is dropped and they can't stand a hard arch under their foot, I can simply lift them in the sagittal plane. That's this plane that I talked about here. If I lift them in that, they start to roll out and away from the arch of the shoe, and therefore they can stand something underneath it, okay? So I would lift them up, they would roll out, and then when I put this arch in there, they would be like, I can feel it, but not nearly as much as I could in the other shoe that I had on. So some shoes, like this one here, are actually 0 drop. This looks like it drops a lot, it doesn't. Your heel sits clear down here. This is a 0 drop shoe. You stand on the forefoot and the rear foot equally, okay? And so it doesn't lift the back of the foot. So the person that rolls out, when I put them in this shoe, their heel drops, and as it drops, it brings the foot level again. Again, that quick thing I gave you about the 3 planes of motions. Anything I do to this plane affects the other 2. Anything I do to this plane affects the other 2. So what I can do is if there's a plane that they can't stand correction in, I can move to a different lesser plane to at least gain some advantage, at least gain some weight. If they're putting 70% of their weight on the inside of their foot, and I can't put an arch in there, well, maybe a shoe that actually tilts them back and lifts them off of that would at least get them down to 60%. Now I'm at a 60-40, which is much easier to work with than a 70-30 as pressure goes. And so that's how we kind of use shoes. And so diabetic shoes, we call them, but they're actually peripheral neuropathy shoes. Any foot that's at risk due to loss of sensation needs a shoe that is built, and there's no way I'm going to be able to show you this too easily, but every seam in this shoe is what they call reverse, meaning instead of laying it with this fabric over here, they take this fabric and put it behind it. And you would say, what's the difference between the seam being laid this way and the seam being laid that way? Well, if the foot goes this way all the time, okay, and there's a seam there, it's going to push that seam or curl that seam up or rub that foot. So a reverse seam shoe, when your arch is, when you walk, your arch goes down and comes back up and goes down and comes back up. So if it's going with the seam, I never feel it. Okay, when I move, my foot goes forward. Now my foot goes backwards when I lift it off the ground. So we're not worried too much about your foot when it's not even on the ground. And so they call it reverse seam. Sometimes they use a tucked seam. So they'll actually tuck the seam together and it'll be like that. That's the best way to do it, but it's also the most expensive way to do it. So you only see it in some of your better shoes. But that's how they work with seams inside the shoe for the foot without sensation. And let me grab something here right next door here. Okay.
Rob, excuse me.
Yeah.
It's 2:45, and I know that you said that you might have to leave at 3, and we need to have some time for Q&A. So I'm just giving you that heads up if you wanted to.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm kind of really at the very end. I left this stuff over there, and if I got to it, I got to it.
Okay,
But
good.
these are shoes that are a little more like something you can wear for dress. And this one's kind of a summertime shoe for a really bad foot. You wouldn't believe the feet that I can fit this into. And so this kind of footwear actually is very adjustable, accommodative, completely lined. And we do have stuff like that we use. And Alec actually, their store does a lot more dress shoes than I live in rural Pennsylvania. Okay, where I live is commonly called Pennsylvania, and so we don't have we wear dress shoes. Trust me, you know. But and we certainly have professionals here. But it's a little more laid back. When you get into Northern Virginia and you have people working for the government or what have you, they buy more dress shoes. It's an affluent area. You can't live there unless you're doing at least pretty well. And a lot of times what happens is in those stores that are closer to a metropolitan area, you can carry higher end shoes and more dress shoes. So Alec is actually more familiar with this category than I am as far as what's available out there. So you definitely have that if you think, okay, I have neuropathy, but I don't want to wear this to work. What can you do for me? I would say, you know, they know what kind of shoes and they have that available in their stock. And so I'm looking around here and I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover for kind of a quick biomechanics and how shoes and orthotics work for total contact. So I'm really ready for questions.
All right, thank you, Rob. We appreciate that, and I want to let people know that I go to a shoe fly store in Charlottesville, which has been very good to me for the past 15 years. So does anyone have a question, or I'll go to chat? There was somebody in the chat that asked about, you have a new store coming up in New York City or close by, right?
There is a store in Huntington, New York right now. One of the owner's sons has decided that he could oversee the store. He has a full-time job, but that gave the company confidence that if they bought this store, that they would have somebody that they knew they could trust to oversee it. Fortunately, after that happened, we found out that the manager and some of the other people that work there are very trustworthy, great people, and we feel so much more confident about that store. That store has not really developed in the sense it has no Pedorthist. It hasn't developed in the category that we're talking in right now. I will say it's a very good sit and fit store. They know how to properly fit shoes. They understand shoes. I'm helping them to learn how to teaching them what I taught you today and how to apply it. And hopefully we'll have a Pedorthist there, you know, in the near future. But yeah, that's in Long Island, Huntington, New York. Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
Belinda asked that question. Then there's one other question that I'm reading from Rory. It says, what type of insole should you use if your feet lean in and you have a callus on the ball of your foot?
And I'm sorry, the name again?
Rory.
Rory.
Rory? Okay, just like the golfer.
Yes, that's right.
Oh.
Thank you.
So, Rory, the first thing I would recommend, the first thing that would come to my mind, I shouldn't recommend without seeing your foot, but ultimately, Rory, I would look to have the heel tilted out. Once I do that, all the pressure decreases. You may need more correction, but any correction I put on after that will feel less intrusive to you, because this correction is just a tilt. You tend not to feel it, other than the fact you say, I feel like I'm not leaning in. Then I can add an arch to that, okay? Now, if you have a callus on the ball of your foot, I may want to actually have a metatarsal pad, but when I put a metatarsal pad on, I have to take your foot and straighten your toes out with my thumb. The reason I do that is because if the foot's so arthritic that when I push, nothing happens, I'm putting something under your foot you're never going to be able to get used to. But if you have a nice amount of flexion there in those joints, I can actually put that under there. You'll get used to it in a day or two. And then your toes will be like this, and you won't have the pressure right here on the bottom of your foot. Thirdly, I can take an offload by peeling one of these out. This is the ladies, so it's pink. The men's are green. Not that we care what the bottom of our insole looks like, but I'm not wearing anything. I might dare wear a pink shirt like Bill, but not on my insole. And so I'm teasing. There you go. But I can also, if I really want to get involved with it, Rory, I can actually cut out the bottom of this to create just a thin layer in between there that callus rests in, so it's not being pushed at all. This is a very hard, stiff material right here and right here, and so in between, it's very soft and like a trampoline, and that's what I would do with your foot, just based on you say I lean in and I have a pressure callus. Now, I don't know how far you tilt forward, how far you tilt backward, whether you're more duck-footed or pigeon-toed. I haven't watched you walk. We measure you here on a pressure plate. We put you on a plate. That plate shows us all in all these different colors where the pressure is on the bottom of your foot. So that's what I would do.
Okay. I just wanted to say real quick. So I have a rare condition that's called chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, the CIDP for short. And it's an autoimmune condition that attacks the peripheral nervous system. Yep. So it results in like really muscle atrophy. Yeah. And so I have, you know, my arch is like no longer an arch anymore, right? Yep. There's like no muscle in between there. Yeah. And then I have the hammer toe, right? And then and I lean in. Yeah. So that's my situation. So it's hard to, I guess, kind of treat, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, the hammer toe is coming from the callus. You're in the ball of thread. You're pushing down so hard here, like here, that the toes come flying up. So if you offload that, you'll get rid of a little bit of that as long as it's not fixed right now. But yeah, I recently listened to it. I was talking about a seminar a 10 series seminar that I've been doing, and I recently just had a very extensive education on your condition, especially with the polyneuropathy. And so protect that foot, keep it lifted, you know, get stuff underneath it, whether it has to be soft or hard, get stuff underneath it and get yourself balanced out, get to a Pedorthist. Where are you from?
Northern Virginia, Alexandria.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. My dad retired from the city of Alexandria, firefighter. And so, yeah, go into one of the Ritchie stores or maybe even just Google Pedorthist. And if you go to the Pedorthic Foot Care Association or put in PFA foot or PFA Pedorthist, you will go on there and there's a link right on the homepage. It says find a Pedorthist. And so you put in your zip code and zip, you got it. But yeah.
Is it Pedorthic Foot Care?
Care.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
It used to be footwear, but they changed it to foot care because there's so much more than footwear to what we do. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Roy. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other
Pedorthist.
questions for, I don't see anything else in the chat. You can go to the bottom of your screen and raise your hand, or I'm looking. Pat, go
Rob,
ahead.
do we need a prescription? I need to understand that. Or can you just walk in the store and say, I'd like to talk with a Pedorthist?
Right. For me to biomechanically put you at an advantage, I do not need a prescription. I can do a lot by putting you at a biomechanical advantage. Okay. If you have a specific condition that is undiagnosed, whether it's specific spot area or a systemic, like diabetes is systemic, it's your whole system, endocrine, and so if you have that, then I might be able to do something. I had a fella that recently not recently, I'm sorry. I had a fella that come in and wanted treated, and I actually he was driven in, lived a hard life, smoked all his life, was a drinker, and had type 1 diabetes, 36 years old. And I treated him, but I told the guy that drove him in, his buddy, I made an appointment for him at the wound clinic. You need to take him now. You do not take him home, refuse to take him home, take him over there and kick him out of the truck if you have to, but get him in to see that. His dressing didn't look right, and it was because his wife, who was a certified nursing assistant, had wrapped it, but she didn't know what she was doing. Most nurses don't know how to wrap a diabetic wound, let alone a nursing assistant. And so I made him, I molded him for custom orthotics, but said I would not dispense him unless he come back with a prescription and had been to the wound clinic because he had an ulceration. And long story short, 2 weeks later, I called his wife and said, we have these here, and I wanted to find out if he had went to seek professional help. And she said he hadn't, and he had also passed away from sepsis. Yeah, terrible situation, but he was too hard-headed to go to that. It was right across the street, right here. And I just wanted him to go over and have it looked for. He was on Medicaid. He would have got it paid for, but very sad. So, yeah.
That's a follow-up question. Does Medicare pay for any of this? And then Rebecca, I see your hand. Does Medicare pay for the orthotics or any of the care?
Yeah, that's yes, but there's criteria. If you're diabetic, okay, and you have a peripheral neuropathy, and you have some condition as a result of that peripheral neuropathy, yes, even if it's very minimal. If you have the worst foot in the world because of peripheral neuropathy, but you have not been diagnosed with diabetes, you will not get a penny. And that's literally because legislation rules medicine instead of follows medicine or defers to medicine. And so when they write laws, it's not one, person or party's issue. It's just how our system works. They write a law and you say, well, I'm worse than that guy, but I'm not included. Well, that's the law. So it's not covered, which drives me crazy because they should get rid of the diabetes designation for treatment and move it to peripheral neuropathy because of the amount of idiopathic neuropathy, or like Rory's condition. He should be covered if he has a callus or ulceration. He should be getting full treatment and full coverage, or whatever coverage he has. Yeah.
Sounds like more lobbying this group and others like us need to do. Rebecca.
Yeah. Yes, the PFA is currently doing that, lobbying for peripheral neuropathy designation. Not getting anywhere as of yet, but doing that, yeah.
Okay, Rebecca, you're up.
Rob, fabulous talk, fabulous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My question is, my most pain is in my left foot, right at the inside arch part.
Mhm.
Is that something that I can wear something to help? It's only in the one foot.
About right here.
Well, it's right at the top of the arch. Yeah,
Up
both
here,
both kind of top and bottom.
top and bottom, but through this area.
Right.
Okay, you have a bunch of, you have a bunch of bones there that are all square blocks. Okay, think of a wall, maybe a wall that you have, you know, on your property that's stone and it's all put together with mortar. But
Okay.
our feet, those block bones move like this. Okay, in between those bones, you can have arthritis, which is a big part of that. I can lock that with a stiffer arch, lock that arch, and it will yaw and pull less, and you'll feel better. If that's the issue, that's generally the biggest issue there. If it's top and bottom. Top only, you could have a little bit of a problem with the dorsal vein that goes in and feeds the foot with blood. It could be a little compromised. It gets really bruisey feeling. But if it's top and bottom in the bones, then you probably need to just simply get an arch. Now, the proper arch would have to be determined by looking at your foot. But yeah, you need to lift it.
Do we need to make an appointment if we want to come in and see you guys?
I would at least call ahead and say, is one of the Pedorthists going to be there tomorrow at afternoon or whatever, at very least. But yes, you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you don't want to show up, you know, if nobody's there, so it's just be a wasted trip. So yes, it's best to make an appointment. So.
Okay.
You know, I just showed you pictures of my feet, and I have a callus on the edge of my foot, and I was wondering, can you see it?
This is Peter Coro.
If it gets to the big screen, I can, but the little one it's in now, I don't know how that
I'll
switches
put the
back.
big screen on.
I think I can do that.
Okay, just a minute.
There you go, Peter.
Thank you.
It's on the back heel like that.
Wait a minute, right there. You see it?
Yep.
That is what it's called. Is that a callus?
It might be a little bit more of a shear force thing than a pressure thing. It could be pressure. Does it bother you or hurt when you touch it?
No, I have feelings in my foot. You see that I have about 3 toes that have been amputated.
Yep.
And I have the other foot. I have the thing where you talk about that, and I wear these kind of shoes.
Yeah.
And I see I'm diabetic
Yep.
neuropathy, and I have a doctor.
Yeah.
This is more advanced than you're talking about, I believe.
No, I can actually do custom molded shoes. I know all about those. The something needs to be put in the heel of that to offload that. And even if I got something like this, okay, and I got your callus right in the middle of it, and I had this in your shoe, maybe I would cut the top off and just have the bottom there of that and put your callus right there. That's going to help that to resolve. And so I whoever did the molding for your shoes is able to do that, and I would go see them.
Okay. Just for your information, I don't know if you can see that, but that's my doctor. But it's upside down, isn't it? So
No, it isn't.
Oh.
No. Okay, terrific. Go see him. He'll know what to do.
Okay, I will.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Sure thing.
All right, before I've got a little after 3, but anyone else? I know, Rob, you have to go, but is there any other question that somebody has? Speak up now.
If there are no questions,
Going
I
once?
just want to thank Rob. Oh, go ahead.
Going twice?
This is Alec.
Alec.
Oh, I was
Okay,
going to say,
Alec, go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you. Rob, thank you for agreeing to do this. This was greatly helpful for many people. I know it's just a small number of us here, but we all know people with food problems, and just send them to the right place, whether it's you or your friends, your family. You can contact us, and we'll see what we can help you out with. So thank you, Rob, for agreeing to do this.
You're welcome, Alex. Yep, I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Rob. I hope to
Yes,
see you in Charlottesville one day.
Yeah, I'll be down there on the 11th. Yep.
All right. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, folks, I
F1.
got 3:05. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back. Okay?
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. What can we do?
I'm just going to disconnect modem and then we'll see where we go from there.
All righty.
I'll get you on my hotspot if you want.
Yes, I would like to, just to be able to.
Let's see how do I do this.
Bill?
Yo.
Bill Porter, this is Pat. I told you that we were having.
Pat, you just froze. Pat, you just froze.
I'm trying to freeze.
Yeah, I wonder if they just tried to switch servers for Pat, and that's why it froze.
Does Pat see me? Pat? No. Shoot, I was going to take a break. Damn.
Enforced break.
I don't even see her. She's gone. Peter, see what you did? Can't hear.
Still can't hear you, Peter.
Is he talking to his kid or his wife or his grandparents or?
Yeah, I put it on mute because my grandkids are around. They live
Well, they're
with
very
us.
cute. You have a very nice little grandson.
Yeah, they keep us going, keep us active. Okay, I'll put it back on mute.
Oh, I thought you, okay. Well, I'm going to stretch a bit. I'll be back in about 2 minutes.
See, can you put it? Mike, you said you want an intermission. I was trying to put something on so everybody could have a little pleasant thinking while they're having an intermission.
This is the best intervention I can think of. Mm. He's wandered off. Oh, he's waving at us.
Oh, there went the other. Hey, Aaron. Megan, tell Aaron to come back.
How old is he?
He's 4.
He's 4.
There he is in the corner right there. Come here, Aaron. Show us your transformer or whatever it is. Tell me about it. What is it? What is it? Bat robot.
All right, I'm back, and then so I've got 310. So Peter, your grandson's cute, but you gotta
I gotta go. I know.
we gotta do open. We're gonna do attendees and open discussion, and you have to mute or take your grandson for a walk. And they grow up fast, so spend every moment with them.
I'm trying to move just a minute.
We lose Pat too, right? Right.
This is not a good day from a technical standpoint.
Well, well, Judd is, of course, he has lost his younger brother. He lost his older brother last week, and his 2 brothers is within 2 weeks. So he's at funerals. But anyway, I don't think we have any new attendees. Do we? Is anyone new? Ricky, I've seen you before.
How you doing?
Unmuted, Rick. Oh, there you go.
Go ahead, Ricky.
No, it's been a little while.
Well, tell us about what's going on.
Once again, I only have good news. I am just still working hard every day with all the different types of machines that I use. You know, the rebuilder and the what you call it, the lithographs where you paddle your feet.
Mhm.
And still taking the let me grab them real fast. There's some pills here.
Rory, did you get your question answered?
No, Rory had to. Go ahead, Ricky.
Oh yeah, you know, I'm still taking the nerve renewal, and with the nerve renewal, you know, and watching what I'm eating, you know, not putting anything in my system that I know is going to irritate the nerves. I can say I'm about 95% healed. About 95.
Wonderful news.
Yeah, you know, because once again, I'm fighting it from the inside out and the outside in.
Well,
So
I'm just curious, did you experiment with other drugs or supplements before you found what works for you or what?
no, I sort of, you know, did my research on YouTube and made sure that I was taking, or, you know, YouTube and there's other places to make sure I was taking the best of the best as far as pills for the nerve. And this seemed to be the best one for me in terms of what is the ARL? What is it? The
Alpha lipoic acid.
Yeah, you know, yeah.
So you're taking the Nerve Renew.
Mhm.
Got it. Vitamin, yeah, okay. That has some B6 in it, so be careful of B6.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because my B6 did get high, but what I do is I make sure at least every 6 months I get blood work. You know, I get blood work taken, and my doctors monitor. The doctors monitoring my blood work to make sure I don't have too much B6, B12, those type of things. As a matter of fact, with these new pill, I'm down to just taking 1 a day because my B6 was getting high because I was taking 2 a day. So I'm down to taking one a day, and once again, is watching what I'm eating and constantly working on making sure I have blood flow flowing through my legs. That I have found to be very important. So I got like 4 or 5 different little machines that I use to do that. And I'm fine. I mean, it's not healed. I still have neuropathy, but neuropathy don't have me.
Well, that's good. And remember, as I always say, motion is lotion, rest is rust.
Right.
Ben, would
Right.
you like to talk about the B6 or can you information for us?
Yeah, well, I'll mention that because there is, I think, the misconception out there that B6 ordinarily, if you take a decent amount of it, will lead to neuropathy and pyridoxine toxicity. But this does not seem to be the case for everybody, and it seems to be related to the MTHFR mutation, which is the part of the genetic makeup that enables people to methylate B vitamins, which can only be used in a methylated form. The people with that mutation, and it's fairly common, about 10 to 15% of the population, higher among people from Northern European ancestries, where there's a lot of autoimmune stuff that goes on. That particular mutation seems to keep people from adding methyl groups to the vitamins. And most of the cases of B6 toxicity have been in those people where even if they weren't supplementing, without being able to methylate it, the B6 built up in the bloodstream and then began to cause damage. Generally, if you're keeping yourself somewhere between 25, 50 milligrams of B6 a day, and you do not have methylation problems, this is probably not going to be an issue for you, because if you do get a big dose of B6 in there, normally you will excrete it before it has a chance to build up to that level. But I do tell people that when you're talking about B6 toxicity, you have to take this cofactor into account. It's not that people shouldn't take B6, it's that people have to be aware of whether or not they have the mutation, how much they're taking, and exactly what's going on biochemically.
All right. So do you recommend the blood work that somebody should get every year for B6, like
Yeah,
Ricky was talking about?
I definitely think it's a good idea for people who've had any sort of issue with this to get a full vitamin serology workup. And sometimes maybe more than once a year if they can afford it, maybe twice a year. The key, of course, is that you want to know your MTHFR status, because sometimes if you're not methylating, even if you're in the normal range for B6, you may be having a problem if you're not able to methylate it into the usable form. So it's not always that the numbers tell the story; it's the numbers in concert with other things.
Right. Right. Anybody else on any questions and comments? And what y'all think about the Pedorthist? Was that helpful?
I thought it was a fabulous lecture. Very, very informative.
As I had mentioned, that it's actually a pretty big thing in the New York City area. The NSLO company has been around for a very long time doing custom shoes for obviously people with diabetes and other orthopedic problems. And they have a full staff of revolving Pedorthists. I've had my feet examined by them more than once.
Well, I've been going to one in Shoe Fly. It used to be Richie's, and they moved to Charlottesville, and I go to Charlottesville about twice a year, and they're very helpful. I find that people, when you go to a shoe store, usually you don't. I always ask, and I tell people to, before they just go to any shoe store, ask them if they have a Pedorthist on site. Some do, some don't, and I think it's good to have one on site, because sometimes I walk into shoe stores and they're just teenagers walking around, and you pick a shoe and they say, okay, fine, that's it. So I think it's good to find a Pedorthist. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, I just wanted to mention, thanks for having Dr. Orr here. It was a really good presentation, I thought. And I just wanted to mention, I haven't been here for a while for some good reasons, I think. I've been very busy doing patient advocacy. And so I'll put in the chat the links. But my story for CIDP was profiled on the immunodeficiency webpage. And so I'll share the link, and so you can read the story on that. And then I was also profiled in Rare Revolution magazine. And I had a special edition for autoimmune conditions. So my story's in there too. I'm like the first story actually in the magazine for that edition. So I'll share that too. I was interviewed with iHeartRadio. It was about like maybe about a half-hour interview, and it's a podcast. So I kind of like talked about the day in the life of somebody with a condition like ours and what it means for daily living. Which was really, really, I think, successful. I got a lot of feedback from that. And more recently, I have become a patient ambassador for Argenx Pharmaceuticals. And they're a pharmaceutical company that really focuses in on autoimmune conditions, but they have a section for CIDP. And so, I give them, from a patient's perspective, things about, how they can reach out to patients, doctor on patient relations, things like that. So it's kept me very busy. And of course, I still have my full-time job. So lots going on, but I thought I would share that, and I'll put the things in the link. So if you're interested in seeing that for yourself, you can.
Rachel, you are a busy man. Does anyone have a question for Rory?
Rory, you're on
before he has to go
IVIG.
somewhere. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're on IVIG, I assume, right?
I am, but I'm doing the sub-Q, right?
Okay.
Yes, but it's working very well, keeping me very stable. Yes.
Western Neuropathy Association has a particular support group for CIDP and IVIG people, and I don't think anybody there is doing sub-Q, and I'd love to have you come and talk about that if you'd like.
Oh, sure, great, yes.
We do it normally on the third Wednesday of each month. So the next one, I have to look up in June when that is, but it's the third Wednesday. And it normally happens at 6 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know if that's good for everybody, but we have people that come in from all 4 time zones. So I always have to say 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central, 4 Mountain, 3 Pacific. And if you want, I can send you the name of the person who runs it. It's John Phillips. And you definitely should email him and come on into that if you have an opportunity to do so.
Sure, yeah, the third Wednesday, Glenn, is the 19th.
Thank you. I go to about 18 online support groups a month now. I can't keep track of them all except with paper in front of me.
No, I understand. I go to 3, and that's all too much. Anyway, any other questions, comments?
I'm wondering if anybody else here has used a brace, because my experience with this brace was not really all that great. I showed the brace and I tried walking with it in these shoes, and I wasn't very happy with the results. The company actually said, well, maybe those aren't right, and they made another one, and in a sense they were worse. This brace here, you can see it has a flexible ankle. The idea of a flexible ankle is so that you can walk downhill. So that your foot can do this. But I just found the walking in this thing to be very awkward. I tried it, and then I got, so they said, well, maybe that's not good enough, and they made this one, but this one's less flexible. It's a tiny bit flexible. It's got a rigid bar here, but I this was a little more comfortable to walk around the room in, but because it doesn't have any flexibility at the ankle, I wore it for about 6 hours around the house. I cooked supper, and it was hard, but okay. But then I tried to walk down the ramp that I have in front of my house, and I suddenly realized that I couldn't put my foot down.
Well, what kind of shoe you have? You have to put it in a shoe. What shoe do you put it in?
Oh no, it had a shoe. I got a shoe. I went to shoe fly. The shoe is fine.
No, you have to have the right shoe to put that in. They go together.
No, they fitted me into this shoe here.
Oh, okay. No,
Yeah.
that's the wrong shoe. You have
Huh?
to have a leather shoe like I have.
What
That's
shoe?
the wrong shoe. You
What's
gotta
wrong?
have the leather one. Remember I showed you all?
We tried lots of leather shoes and we couldn't find one that would fit.
Well, that's your problem. You got the wrong one. That's all I'm saying.
Why is a leather shoe better?
Because it works. I don't have no problem with mine. I have it. Well, I can't walk without it. I have drop foot.
Uh-huh.
And I have here it is. It's a special shoe made for me. I'm getting another one a couple of weeks from now, and my insurance company pays for it because it costs about $1,000.
Mm.
And if you don't have the right insurance company, then it costs a lot of money for you. But if you have the right insurance company, it costs you nothing. You have to be a diabetic, though. That's my key. I'm diabetic, and so my diabetic doctor says I need it. But you got to have the right shoe, and you have the wrong shoe. That's all I see. You see mine and see mine. Anyway, that's my thought.
Where did you get your shoe?
I get it from the doctor I mentioned to you all, and his name is Dr. Dahara, Dharia in Fairfax. I tried to show you that.
Okay.
You showed your card hold up your card for Mike.
I'm sorry. I need to write that down.
Wait a minute.
Hold the card up so we
I'm
can see.
trying to get to the camera. It's all the way around the world.
I'm getting dizzy.
Yeah, I know, me too. Is it there? Are you?
It's almost as Doctor.
I have to get it, my thing on large.
Just read the letters out to us, Peter.
Okay, it's
D is in dog.
Haria.
Harris.
Hara. Okay.
RIA. I'll try to fix my camera. Still small.
It's Dharia.
Yeah,
Last name.
podiatrist.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry about the confusion. Go ahead.
All right, you got that, Mike?
I think so. Dr. Haria. He's a podiatrist.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mike, it's DHARI.
ARIA.
Dharia, podiatrist in Fairfax.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, got it.
All
Got it.
right, we got it. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mike. Any
Yeah.
other questions?
Ed,
Yeah, Mike.
yeah.
Mike, this is Ed. Hey, Mike, listen, I have drop foot as well, and I've had this for about 4 years now, and I have what they call walk-on flex. It's very similar to what you have, not much flexibility in the foot, but the entire thing fits right inside my sneaker. I've done very well with it for 4 years. Medicare did pay for it. And it's an orthotic that was prescribed by my family physician. He said, you have to have it. I'm not a diabetic. And I went to a specialist store, okay, that put things together for me. And I've been wearing this now for about 4 years. And it, number one, it gives me about 70% improvement on balance. And number two, it takes away the drop foot totally.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's called, if you Google it, walk on flex, you'll see it. But I've been wearing these for about 4 years now, and they really work well for drop foot.
Yeah, I've got these uh, sorry, I've got these. I don't know if you can see this or not, but these are sleeves that go around my ankle, and there's a little piece, and there's a piece that goes in the foot in the shoe, and then they little elastic, they tie them together. I've had these again, like yours, for about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years, and the whole thing for both feet is about, I don't know, about $100, and they've done really well for me. The criticism that I have for this arrangement is I don't have any side to side support, and so let me check out the Walk On Flex. It has some support side to side movement. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I actually walk on a steel plate in the shoe. You wear it for like 2 hours for maybe 3 or 4 days, and then you build up to it. I put it on in the morning now, 5:30. It comes off 10:30 at night. It takes about a week and a half to get used to it. And it does give you a lot of support. There's straps that go around the calf. A bar goes down the back to the plate, and the plate fits inside the shoe.
Mhm.
Now, my insurance paid for it. It's about $1,200 for both.
$1,200. Yeah.
Yeah, Medicare paid for it.
I'll
The
check
old Medicare. The old Medicare.
Mhm.
Now, Ed, did you have to be sized for that before you got it, or did you?
No, I actually, Bill, I have a size 14 shoe. Okay. And what happened was that the person I went to, I happened to have a 14. I have a very wide foot too. And he put it right in there, strapped it right on. I stood up, I started walking. And I'll tell you, my wife was with me at the time, and she said, wow, she said, look at the difference in your walking. And what it does is it gives you good support from the knees down, where you tend to get that numbness from the calf to the foot.
So did you go to a shoe store for that, or what?
No, I went to they actually fit you for prosthetics. Okay,
Oh,
is what I
okay.
wound up going to. Okay, and we have one here up. It's north of me, but it's outside of Atlantic City. But it's a store that fits you for prosthetics. I went there. They had these in stock. He said he can order them as well. But if you Google the Walk On Flex, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's a curved bar that goes down behind the leg, wraps around, and then goes onto the steel plate. I don't see many people walking with these things. I got to be honest with you. But in the wintertime, when I'm wearing jeans, no one even knows I have them on.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Any other questions? Comments? Stories? Rumors? All right. Well, I've got 3:32, and
Thank
I can
God, like
see.
the dog. The
Since
dog
the
is protecting us from the lawnmowers.
since the headmaster is not around, Pat, being a moderator, I can dismiss the class early unless you all want to chat.
Then anybody else have shoe or foot problems? Ricky, Betty Ann?
No, I think we've talked about them. We've seen Peter, we've seen yours. You don't want to see mine.
I have a question about the Good Feet store.
Yes, sir.
Have anybody ever been to the Good Feet store? In the, in this area, because I know the gentleman that was on, he was up in New Jersey or New York, whatever. So I was thinking about the Good Feet store and whether they had people who specialize in the type of things that he was speaking of, or as the different pads and cushions you can put in your shoes.
I live in Richmond, and I have a Good Feet store about a mile away from me. And I went in there last year, and I said, "Do you have a Pedorthist on site?" And they said, "No, but we're looking for one."
Okay.
And they said, "We'll call you." And I'm waiting for the phone to see. I've got the phone right here for a call, but I don't know. I was not impressed, but you know.
Well, see that. Well, I'm glad this gentleman. I'm glad I caught him because I was thinking about going to the Good Feet store, but after listening to him, I see I need to find somebody a little more who was a
Well,
specialist.
but again, I want to say the Good Feet store that I went to did not
Right,
have one
right,
on site. They're looking for
right,
one. So I'm not saying that, and they have not called me, so I guess they have not gotten one.
right,
But I would check it out and ask them, is there a Pedorthist on site?
right. I will.
And they
Mhm.
might say, oh, we've got some guy who or some gal that, so, try it out and see.
Yeah, I'm
Like,
going to ask questions. I'm going
uh,
to ask questions because I
You
know
have to be
they're
your
very
own
expensive.
advocate for shoes, for pills,
Hmm.
for supplements,
Yeah, because I'm almost certain insurance won't cover it, as far as Medicare at least, probably won't cover specialty shoes. I would imagine. I mean, I know they do cover some shoes, but I think that's probably pretty basic as far as,
Probably probably a diabetic shoe, and
Yeah,
so
right. That's what I was thinking
they
of.
have to code it correctly.
Right, right, right. So I
So,
did learn something today, some questions. So I made some notes. So yeah, when I do call them, I'll have some more information about what I'm looking for.
okay.
What Peter was saying was that if you see a podiatrist and they say you've got a particular problem, then if it takes some kind of special help, they'll write a prescription and they'll help pay for that prescription, whatever it is. So I got a prescription essentially to get this thing, and I don't know. I may go back to trying to wear it. I haven't quite, other than the fact that it gives me more stability side to side. I really haven't come to any conclusions about why this would be better than what I have.
Mm,
Well,
Um,
Mike, what you need to do is you and Peter need to go to lunch one day and show what you have and come to some conclusions.
my,
I have
my,
another question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, have anybody dealt with acupuncture as far as nerve damage? Because I went to Kaiser 2 times for that, but they gave me the wrong prescription. But have anybody had any talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I can go. Well, real quick, I went to one and I told him what he was an MD, and he also traveled around the country teaching acupuncture. Anyway, to make a long story short, I went to him and told him what I had, and I said, "Look, how long would it take me to find some relief?" I mean, he says, after 5 treatments, if you don't have some relief, I can't help you.
Okay.
And so my point is, I think I would try it. A lot of people get some relief from it. It works
Okay.
for some people, but I always I say, well, okay, I'm here. It's going to cost me so much. How long are you going to keep, just give me an idea of when will I feel some relief.
Mm, okay. Okay.
But
Well, I'm definitely one of the lucky ones in terms of coming here. I have learned that the main thing is to jump on this early. That don't play with your symptoms and all those type of things. So what I'm really learning is I take every effort I can to learn as much as I can about it. I try to attack it, like I say, from the inside out and the outside in. And it right now seems to be working as far as I still have it, but it's not taking over my body in terms of pain and those type of things. So, I'm just going to keep learning from like coming to places like here, these Zoom meetings and, educating yourself and just attack it before it get to the point where you're sort of limited on what you can do.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And everyone is different, and
Yeah.
what works for me may not work
Right.
for you. And
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure Glenn some people say they're healed, like you're 95% better.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I can
I'm
give it
sure
that.
that happens. Glenn, do you have a comment about what the regrowth of what 1 millimeter a week or something?
Sometimes they say about 1 millimeter a day under optimal
Yeah.
conditions. The point is that anybody who's told by the neurologist that nerves can't regrow is wrong. Nerves can regrow. It tends to be slow. It tends to be patchy and incomplete. But under optimal conditions, which means you first have to stop whatever's damaging them, you can get regrowth. But one of the interesting phenomenons of nerve regrowth, and I certainly went through it, be interesting to see, Ricky, if you go through this or have, is that oftentimes when nerves regrow, because they have to fight through and around other tissue, and they often regrow in patterns that are different from where the nerve roots originally were, you can get all manner of weird sensations going on until the brain learns to reinterpret the signals and it settles down somewhat. It's why a lot of us keep symptom diaries, because I know when I was going through that I actually thought my neuropathy was getting worse because I would get more pain and I would get tingling and I would get all sorts of electrical jolts, but it did die down over weeks to months. And then in
Right.
a longer term
Right.
retrospect,
Right.
I could see like, oh, okay, the general pattern is improving.
Right. Oh no, that's where I'm at. I mean, and I think what's happening with a lot of people is they're just not really concentrating on what they're putting in their body. That, you know, a lot of people, or at least some people I know, they are trying to fight it from the outside, but not concerning themselves too much from the inside. Because I remember a couple of months ago on this Zoom meeting, it was a gentleman who had it, and he was just extremely hard-headed about he didn't want to give up drinking. Well, you know, you have, you can make that decision, but if we all know that, drinking liquor, especially brown liquor, if that's going to damage and harm the nerves, well, you can make a choice. Keep drinking the liquor and not give the nerves an opportunity to heal themselves, or you can do what I'm doing, which is say, I'm not going to put no brown liquor in me, period.
I wanted to comment on, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Ed,
Go ahead.
you're up.
Yeah, Glenn, I have a quick question for you, Glenn. So when I went to Mayo, okay, they gave me the diagnosis of idiopathic axonal. Okay, I have poly. I have small fiber, large fiber. And so the neurologist said, I actually said to the neurologist, well, hold on a minute, what can I do? She said, with axonal peripheral neuropathy, there's not a lot you can do. I don't expect regrowth of the nerve. Now, I just heard you say a minute ago that sometimes the brain may not be picking up the signal of the regrowth. What about axonal?
Well, axonal only means that it's the nerve fiber itself that is being damaged as opposed to the myelin sheathing. All nerves have axons, not all have myelin sheathing. The small fiber nerves that subsume the sensations of pain and temperature are not myelin sheathed, and neither are most autonomic nerves. One of the things that happens, and again, I'm sure Rory could speak to this, for people who have things like CIDP, where most of the attack is on the myelin with secondary axonal damage, if they can forestall through IVIG or other immune modulating therapies the breakdown of the myelin sheathing and give that a chance to rebuild, that will tend to rebuild more quickly than the axons will. But once you have that in place, the axons do have a chance, now somewhat more protective, to be and to experience regrowth. The problem is that it also depends upon what's damaging things in the first place and if that can be found. If you're designated as idiopathic, part of the problem is that they don't know. Now, I will say that people who are idiopathic tend to be much more idiopathic at local neurology practices than they do at tertiary research centers, where they tend to do a lot more testing. But people who were originally diagnosed as idiopathic and eventually find the cause tend to fall into one of four categories. One is that they have a hereditary neuropathy, and that is very hard to deal with because there's a genetic defect. There are hundreds and hundreds of hereditary neuropathy conditions. One of the great successes of the Human Genome Project has been the discovery of a lot of these. But it doesn't really help the people who suffer from them much because there still isn't good therapies for a lot of those hereditary things, because it would really involve stem cell types of therapies to replace genetic sequences beyond where we have the ability to do so. There are also people who are originally diagnosed as idiopathic who have some sort of autoimmune situation. There are a lot of autoimmunities besides CIDP, and you really need people who are expert in this to really look for all of the different autoimmune conditions and all of the antibodies to different parts of peripheral nerve. The good thing about finding one of those is that there are treatments that do help a lot of them, as Rory, of course, has talked about. There are immune modulating therapies beyond IVIG as well. Some people get steroids, some people do plasmapheresis. The third category, and I think they're going to find this more and more now, considering how we've all grown up, there are people with toxic neuropathies. Now, a lot of the toxic neuropathies people know about are things like, say, chemotherapy. That's fairly obvious. Or even statins, for example, where some people suffer from them. But we're exposed to a heck of a lot of chemicals out there, especially those of us who grew up in the mid-20th century. And the problem is that the effects of some of these are well known, the heavy metals and organic phosphates. Others are not so well known and are not even suspected. I have been involved with some cases through Weill Cornell where it was discovered, for example, that somebody had neuropathy and nobody knew what was going on, designated idiopathic, until the gentleman talked about having spent a lot of time in the printing trades and being exposed to a number of different neurotoxic chemicals there. So there's that group. And then there's a fourth group, not, again, counting the people who are truly idiopathic right now. There's a fourth group who I believe suffer neuropathic symptoms from pre-diabetic or other metabolic syndrome problems that are not frank diabetes. There's a lot of work that's been done at Johns Hopkins about how even pre-diabetic levels of blood sugar can cause rather painful neuropathies, particularly small fiber ones. And more literature comes out about that, as time goes on. But it's still probably true that a good quarter to a third of neuropathies are idiopathic, more among the people who have predominantly small fiber syndromes. I suspect that as the science grows, because it's even much better than when I first started, having this 21 years ago, that they are going to discover more and more autoimmunities, more and more hereditary causes behind a lot of this.
Yeah, when I went to Mayo in Rochester, Minnesota, when I asked the neurologist, I said, "Look, off the record, just give me a suspicion." She said, "I think I would go for genetic testing." I decided not to. I have 3 grown children between 40 and 50, and I have 4 grandchildren. And I wouldn't know what to do if I found out it was genetic. So my wife and I discussed it. We decided I'm not going to go for the genetic testing. I did get tested for CMT. It was negative, and I stopped right there. I said, that's enough for me. So I don't want to have that knowledge. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of, what do you do with it? But thanks, Glenn. Appreciate your help.
Yeah. It's always a choice for people who might have a suspected genetic situation. And yes, some of the common ones, that are easy to test for, like Charcot-Marie-Tooth syndrome or hereditary neuropathy with liability to pressure palsies, can be found out pretty easily. But I always tell people, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, the best database in the world of neuropathic conditions, not just neuropathy, is the Washington University at St. Louis Neuromuscular Database, which is listed in my Essential Neuropathy websites, which you can get, by the way, at pnhelp.org, which is the Western Neuropathy Association website. One of the interesting things about the hereditary neuropathy section there is that since I first started consulting it back in about 2004, it has grown at least 5-fold. It's just the last 21 years, the enormous number of hereditary conditions that have neuropathic symptoms that have actually been identified with specific genetic problems.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them out there. Now, some of them only affect, a few families. They're very unique. But there are some that have fairly wide swaths of influence across certain ethnocultural groups and across certain geographic areas.
Thank you, Glenn. I see Pat is back. Pat,
finally.
are you with us? Pat, are you? The headmaster is back, and I just want to say that Pat. We're gonna have a wrap up, but I see one hand from
Yes,
Ricky
Ricky.
Peoples.
Yeah, Glenn, I just want to ask Glenn, because he's so knowledgeable. I just want to ask him, what is his thoughts about integrative medicine as opposed to, I hear people talking about the neurologist, and I decided that I'm not going to just deal with this from a neurology, because they're dealing with just medicine. What is Glenn's thoughts on integrative medicine to cure this? Because that's what have worked for me.
Glenn, you got 5 minutes.
I'll do less.
And
It's
then we go to overtime.
It's fine to bring it in, because I do believe that there are certain aspects that, alternative practitioners can get involved with and can do for people that maybe won't occur to your average neurologist out there. I do caution, though, that I'm always looking for those things, such as some of the supplements, where there are good double-blinded studies on them. There are a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of neuropathy scams out there with people claiming they'll cure you immediately. I know of nothing that cures immediately. I know of things that help over time. Some of them don't fall into standard medical practices, things like coenzyme Q10, for example. But there are definitely, it's definitely worth exploring that. You just have to make sure you're getting really good and well documented evidence on it. I always go to the major health services, the National Institutes of Health, Washington University Neuromuscular, as I mentioned, particularly for neurology, Johns Hopkins, which I actually think is better than the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic as well. There are studies on these things out there. They're just sometimes harder to find.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, Pat.
Hey, Bill,
are
before you close up, I just wanted to respond to Ricky's original question about acupuncture, if I can.
Go ahead, real quick.
Yes. So I found an acupuncturist out in Tyson's at the Trinity Wellness Center. He is a neurologist, a functional medicine doctor, and a chiropractor. And he uses all three modalities when I go for treatment.
Okay.
And he's exceptional. He really is very good. I had an adverse reaction to the RSV vaccine where I couldn't walk upright for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
I went in to see him. The very day I went to see him, I could walk upright.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, he's really just phenomenal with what he does. So it's very expensive, though, I'll tell you that. And insurance,
of course,
pays very little of it. So, I mean, you're probably going to pay like 75% of that, which is a lot. But for me, it works. And you have to go consistently every day or every week. I mean, he has patients who get better, right? They feel better and then they stop coming. And then they, then of course they regress. He's like, no, this is like an ongoing life thing, for certain conditions that you have. That,
okay.
Require this type of maintenance. So I just wanted to tell you that.
Okay, thank you, Rory. Thank you for everybody so far. And I have to pass back and I have to go to Pat, and we do have overtime after Pat. So hold your questions, but the headmaster is back with the group.
Yeah.
And you are up, Pat.
Okay, I apologize. I'm at my sister's and they had a modem problem and I was kicked off for that bit of time. So anyway, I would like, yeah, I'm glad we recorded it so I can hear what I missed. Anyway, quick wrap up is that the Bethesda Chevy Chase PN group will meet next on Thursday, June, oh dear. I thought it was the 6th.
I think it's June 6th, right?
20th.
20th, that's right.
Oh, so it's later in the month.
This is the Bethesda Chevy Chase Maryland group. Meets next on June 20th at 7 o'clock. And that's Steve Klitzman's group, if you're interested. Pittsburgh PN is not meeting in July. We, PNSN, are meeting July 6th, even though it's sort of the leftover part of July 4th weekend. It's too complicated to change the date. We're keeping it July 6th, so be aware that we will meet on Saturday at 2 o'clock. I wanted to mention that there was a webinar on the Foundation for Peripheral Neuropathy site. It was recorded and it's called brain-based balance exercises. And if you are interested in, this is proprioception, using your senses, touch, etc., sight, hearing, all of them combined, and it's related to balance. I certainly am going to look at the recording, which is on the Foundation's website, foundationforperipheralneuropathy.org. And lastly, I would like to say that you may have realized that Judd, our technical guru, who's usually here to help with problems with the technical aspects of the meeting, was not here today. And I'd like to extend condolences to his family on the loss of 2 brothers in 2 weeks. I can't even imagine. His older brother, and then 2 weeks later, his younger brother have passed. So he is now at a memorial service today for the younger brother, and will be going to his older brother's service next. So very sad for Judd and his family. Okay, I think that's all. Overtime. Oh, one more important thing. When you leave the meeting today, you will have an exit survey. It's really helpful to us if you will take 2 minutes to just answer the questions. It pops up automatically. You just answer them and hit submit, and then it compiles it for us, gives us ideas about other speakers or other topics you might be interested in, or feedback on the actual operation of the meeting. And I'm going to end with Rory saying, I hope you'll go over to overtime for us for 1 minute and put that doctor's name at Tyson's in the chat, or tell me it so that I have it recorded somewhere. People ask us all the time for references. So, and I will join you at overtime. Thank you.
Okay, well, again, I thank everyone for I think we had a very lively discussion, and I appreciate everybody being here. And I have 3:56, and we go in overtime at 4, so I declare that we start overtime now. And those that leave us, thank you for being with us. And those that want to keep on chatting and talking, and please join us. And we go from 4 to 4:30. And if I cut anybody off, I'm sorry, but that's my job. So anyway, see you in overtime.
I wanted to mention that I was supposed to ask Glenn to add the meetings that Western Neuropathy is holding in July, or if you are canceling any, to let people know. That also is on our website, or will be when Judd returns. You can always check our calendar for any local or any Zoom meetings being held across the country that we're aware of. Thank you.
All right. Overtime.
People can also go to pnhelp.org and look at the events over there, so they can actually get all the groups we're doing now and the webinars as well.
Good point.
And I have the doctor's information in the chat there.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you, Rory. Thank you, Glenn. And I'm sure that Mike and Peter are going to have lunch together, right? And share. Well, anyway. Archie, go ahead, Mike. You got your hand up?
I don't know if anybody can hear me over the sound of the dog. Ricky asked about Rory. Oh gosh, Rory's gone. I wanted to respond about acupuncture. I don't think there's any proof that acupuncture does anything about your nerves physically. So if you're talking about it doing anything, it's doing something about the way in which you respond to the sensations that you feel. Every sensation you feel is interpreted by your brain, which can turn it into feelings of pain. So if acupuncture used on a frequent basis or infrequent basis get you to the point where your brain stops making pain from these feelings, then you're going to be better off. But ultimately, it's not because acupuncture changes your nerves. It's because it changes the way your brain interprets these signals.
Okay, interesting. I just want to do everything possible to never get on gabapentin or anything else. I'm fortunate enough where just the topical creams, Outback, all these different creams, once a week maybe or so, I have to put those on. But whatever it takes not to take gabapentin, that name alone just so that's what I'm working on.
Well, I just spoke to Lynn Mobley, and she's doing very well with her peripheral neuropathy. She has a little bit of pain and bothers her. She takes gabapentin, and she for her, that's all she needs, and her life is
good for her.
And whether the gabapentin is actually doing anything other than making her feel like she's doing something about it, who knows? We don't know. We know so little about how the brain handles these signals. Gabapentin apparently does something to change the way those signals are processed, and for her it works. It works for other people. Some people take massive doses of gabapentin,
I'm hearing
way more than what they were tested with.
right.
What is that? What are the side effects of gabapentin in such massive doses? Well, they didn't test that because that wasn't what it was prescribed for, and that wasn't what it was tested for. Again, what is pain? Ricky, have you read the article that I wrote on the website about chronic pain?
No, well, no, but I was just looking at it from a realistic point of view that if you have extreme pain, once again, like everyone is saying, everybody's affected by this disease in different ways. Mine seems to be more minimal compared to some other people's. And like you said, as far as the gabapentin, some people are taking all the way up to 2,500 milligrams. I mean, I couldn't handle 300. And what I dislike about it is not only the way it made me feel, but that is it treating what I have? And I think hopefully Glenn seemed to know a lot about this. Glenn, am I correct in saying gabapentin doesn't help you resolve the issue? It just makes your mind not think about the issue, but you still have the nerve damage. So I was trying to do things to work on the nerve, to heal the nerve. And I heard Glenn say very carefully that yes, it takes time, but if you take the time to focus on working on healing the nerve, then that should be, lower the pain level. Am I correct in saying that, Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, I won't, disparage gabapentin because basically the way it works is that it upregulates the secretion of the GABA neurotransmitter, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, mostly within the central nervous system. It's good for people who are suffering from that terrible burning neuropathic pain. And it does relieve that, but you're right, it's not going to do anything in terms of healing the nerves. It's a symptomatic treatment. And but I do think that there are times, I was certainly one of them because I had a very acute onset, where you need that symptomatic relief to then be able to go off and do other things.
Absolutely.
And go in and start to come up with other strategies. I always tell people that I had an acute onset that went basically from the base of the fourth toe in my right foot to the top of my head in under 72 hours. A burning, searing, dysesthetic pain that's been likened to a sensory small fiber Guillain-Barré. And the thing that I'll get into Bartlett's with is the quote that if you want me to describe the pain, imagine you've gotten sun poisoning over your entire body and that somebody rubbed it with steel wool. So yeah, good metaphor, right? You can all relate to that. I was fortunate that gabapentin, although I had to ramp it up to a pretty high dose, worked enough so that I could put some clothing back on again, so I could get some
Right.
sleep, so I could eat
Right.
something, and then delve further into investigating
Okay.
neuropathy.
Mhm.
You know, and that I do think that, you know, for people who experience this, especially when they can experience it quickly, it's okay to go for the symptomatic relief, whatever will give that to you. But
Right.
most of the symptomatic relief things that are out there, most of the standard stuff, and even a good deal of the other stuff, is not designed to heal nerves. That takes basically two things. One, you got to remove whatever's damaging them, and that may be hard to figure out. In the case of diabetes or certain autoimmunities, it's not as hard. But for a lot of other people, it's going to be a long investigation if they find out at all. If you can do that and you could start taking lifestyle or other therapeutic modalities to stop the damage, then you have the capability of rebuilding and regenerating nerve. And yes,
Okay.
that's going to take B vitamins. It's going to take, you know, a reasonably good diet. I always tell people, even if you're not diabetic, even if you're not alcoholic, and even if you're not celiac, when you have neuropathies, you should treat yourself as if you are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
Glenn, I'd like to ask you something. I have just recently seen a new neurologist for pain and tingling in my fingers. For the first time, my hands are involved. And I was surprised, had really looked at my medical record and spent more than an hour with me. And his suggestion or thinking at this point is that my idiopathic might actually be incorrect, that the cause may be B12 deficiency, because he could see it over time. He went back to
Okay.
2015 all the way to 24, and each time I was getting worse. And he said that your primary care physician wouldn't pick up on it because the range that they put is not related to peripheral neuropathy, it's related to blood and blah, blah, blah. So he said they're in some cases, they're beginning to post with test results the PN range, which was, he said, anything under 400, and mine was 284 or something like that.
Oh, if you're at 284, you're deficient. Okay. Are you supplementing with B12?
Well, I never knew I was deficient. So he just now has asked me to do 2,000 a day of B12. So I just sublingual.
Okay. Methylcobalamin?
Yes.
Yeah, because just in case you have the MTHFR mutation, that way you won't have that problem chemically.
I have other test results that haven't come in yet.
Yeah. Okay, so a little B12 stuff if people want to hear about it. Yes, generally the lab ranges for B12 normalcy that they do in the United States ranges somewhere from about 211 to 900 and something nanograms per deciliter if you actually look on a lab report. Interestingly enough, though, in keeping with what you've just said, Pat, in Europe and Japan, they don't do this. They start the lower range around 500, which is why I've always said, hey, you know, if you're eating a normal diet and you're at 284, you're deficient. You know, now it could be for a lot of reasons. People do have trouble absorbing B12 with age. Intrinsic factor that breaks it out of foodstuffs is difficult. All vegans should supplement B12 because we're not cows. We do not produce B12 in our intestines. And so we need some animal product or supplementation to do it. But even for people in the 500s, because again, if you're eating a normal diet, you should have a higher level than that. I tell people there are two other tests which can confirm a usable B12 deficiency. Those are a test for homocysteine, which is an inflammatory marker, not all that difficult to get. The other one, a little more difficult to get, it's a specialty lab thing, is methylamaic acid, which is actually a metabolic breakdown product of B12, cobalamin.
Okay, say it again,
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat also because, and by the way, I actually got a lot of this stuff off the NeuroTalk website from Rose Furman, who was my B12 mentor and basically went through almost all the papers out there about it. So it's homocysteine and methylamaic, and I have to spell this right. It never takes it anyway, acid.
Okay, and who was Rose Furman? Where is she?
Rose Furman is basically one of the stalwarts who originally founded the NeuroTalk website some 25 years ago. It's also one of the things that's on my Essential Neuropathy website.
Okay.
In the days before social media and the days before Zoom, we had these boards where people accumulated enormous amounts of information from medical studies and various other sources that we would basically go through and vet and look through and then post to the site if needed. NeuroTalk still exists, although it certainly doesn't have the activity that it once did because people decamped and went to Facebook and places like that.
Right.
But it is an excellent source of this information. And also the Washington University Neuromuscular website, again, is a
Right.
very, very good source for it as well.
Okay.
See, I think B12 deficiency is underdiagnosed. It's definitely not suspected unless you're like been vegan for a long time, or unless you absolutely have evidence of, say, stomach breakdown or celiac. There are a lot of people out there who are celiac that don't absorb any of the vitamins that well and need supplementation. But definitely at 284, yeah, build the stores back up.
Okay.
Now, if you don't have a methylation problem, here's something else that may happen to you, something I have to explain to a lot of doctors. If you're absorbing the B12 in good dosages, in several months, you may have a very high level outside the high range. I mean, the last time I went and had a B12 thing drawn, I was like at 1687.
Wow.
And I had to explain to them that I actually supplement and that I supplement enough that that's not a surprise to me. Because again, the standard like American upper ranges go to about like 900 and something.
Okay.
And again, physicians who are not well versed in this may look at that and go like, ah, and start wondering why. But you do have to mention that you supplement.
Sure.
You know,
Okay, my question is, does this mean, it goes back to Ricky, does this mean that, oh, if I continue this for, say, a year, that I'll see improvement in the burning of my feet, that there is some connection? Is that really talking causal?
It certainly can be. B12 deficiency is one of the, and the symptoms of it is one of the great masqueraders of medical conditions. It's not only neuropathy, it's central nervous system dysfunction, it's visual disturbances, and in severe cases, it's been enough to make psychiatrists believe that people had dementia. The medical literature has a good number of case studies in it where elderly people with B12 deficiencies, when they got supplementation going, suddenly their mental faculties started coming back. So,
well,
I mean,
my husband will be happy that I'm taking supplements then. Okay, thank you. I didn't want to take up everybody's time, but I was really curious what Glenn would think about this because it was sort of exciting to hear. Maybe there's some help.
Yeah. If you're taking supplements, why is it so low?
I just started last week taking the supplements.
Oh, who recommended you take the supplements?
The neurologist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. At 284, I'm not surprised by that. Now, I take it you're not vegan.
No.
Okay. I take it you're not celiac as far as you know.
No, but I am of Irish descent. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. And there's a definite Northern European tendency towards autoimmune conditions that can interfere with vitamin absorption.
Well, interestingly, I was diagnosed with Crohn's and took medication for years until a different gastroenterologist did my colonoscopy and talked to me. And he said, there is no evidence of Crohn's. And he took me off all the medicine, and I've done better than I did with all the medicine I had taken. So I don't know. Then I go back and somebody says, nope, if you had Crohn's, once you have it and seen on the colonoscopy, then you can't say you don't have it anymore. It may be in remission, but 4 people in our family have Crohn's. So it didn't surprise me when he said it. But right now, I hope it never comes back.
Yeah. a lot of gastroenterologists, and I happen to know a couple of very good ones here in New York City who actually saved my wife from having to have gynecological stuff. And I can tell that story too, which had to do with liver enzymes. But the idea is that, yes, they often, once they diagnose you with Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, even if you go into remission, even if a lot of it heals, the underlying mechanisms may still be there. And if you're not like just following standard of care, they will always characterize you that way.
I see.
But
I was
there are,
thinking-
again, there are plenty of people with Crohn's who are in remission. So
Well, I asked him if they could change it for insurance, so I wouldn't have it on my record and he said, no, once you've
yeah.
been diagnosed, you're done. So I'm going to stop talking. Maybe Betty Ann has something to say. Hello, Betty Ann. Welcome.
Hi, Pat. No, I was just curious with the B12. I was going to a neurologist who was giving me B12 injections, and I go regularly for blood work for cholesterol.
Uh-huh.
The B12 was over 2,000, and my CP was not happy with that. And the neurologist just kept saying, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." Well, she has since been relieved of working at that practice.
Oof.
And I'm no longer doing the injections. My B6 numbers went up, and so we took me off the multivitamin. Then she said, we'll take B6 3 days a week. Well, B6 still goes up high, so now I'm down to 1 day a week. I don't know. This is just crazy.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, if you were getting injections, I'm not surprised your B12 numbers were that high.
Right.
We'll see if they come down somewhat, obviously, in time. B12, by the way, one of the things that people think about B vitamins is that whatever you don't use, you excrete. That's true to a certain extent, but a certain amount of B12 does get stored in the liver, which means actually in your case, Pat, for you to get to the number you were at, you probably had to like draw down your stores over a fairly long period of time. And hopefully that keeps you from being too symptomatic.
2015 was the first blood work, and then it up to 24, it just kept going down. So
yeah, which implies with age, the implication, and of course this is not the only thing that can cause it, is that you're no longer secreting what's known as intrinsic factor in your stomach that breaks B12 out of foodstuffs. That was a gradual decline, and therefore you may have been taking in enough in your food, but it just wasn't getting broken down to be usable.
Okay,
I mean, the reason I talk all the time about the sublingual B12 as opposed to the B12 injections is that B12 injections are expensive. And, you know, unless you have good stuff that you can, good insurance to cover it, it can be problematic. Plus, it's painful. Sublingual, and this is again, you'll see all this on NeuroTalk if you go delving into the papers there, seems to be just as effective even with people who have trouble with intrinsic factor, because the mega dosing, like you're on a dose of 2,000 micrograms, right?
Right.
The idea is at that dosage, you can passively absorb through the mucosal membranes of your mouth 1 to 2% of the dose, which is enough for minimum daily requirements and even to build some stores back up. So even if you're not like swallowing it and absorbing it through your stomach, you can get enough of it that way. And the good thing, of course, about B12, which hopefully you found out, is that it's really cheap.
Yeah, it was no problem. Well, the pharmacist was very emphatic, though, that I get the sublingual. She said, don't take the one that says take it with a meal and swallow it. She said,
do not
it's
do
not
that.
going to do anything for you. So
yeah. I always tell people, as far as supplementing, B12 is one of those things you want to take if you're doing it by lozenge. Take it separately from meals and everything else because it is so easy to interfere with its absorption. The cobalamin molecule is the largest molecule the body uses for nutritive purposes on a day-to-day basis. It's an incredibly long involved molecule, even more so when it's methylated. You know, and this is where like you start getting into organic chemistry, which fortunately I know something about. But the idea behind it is that if you take it, you know, and this is the way I do it, I'll take it at least an hour before eating anything else. And if it's on the other side, it's like at least 2 hours after eating something.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't take it with any other supplements, because certain other supplements, you can take them with others and it's not a big deal. You know, you can take like, you know, your alpha lipoic and your like CQ10 together if you're doing that. Or like I take fish oil with magnesium. You know, they don't tend to compete with each other. but it's very easy to compete with B12 absorption.
Oh dear. I also do a, what is it, a proton inhibitor?
Oh, you see, and that also, the reason, there's another good reason then for you taking the sublingual and getting that passive absorption. Proton pump inhibitors, while necessary for people with reflux, can absolutely undercut vitamin absorption in the gastrointestinal tract.
Oh, wow. So how should I take those 2 pills? I mean,
Well, if you're doing the lozenge,
yes,
right, the sublingual, just
yes.
let it swirl around your mouth for a while, let it melt in your mouth over however many minutes it takes, and
No, I
just do
meant,
it.
then how soon thereafter could I take the proton? Because I tend to take everything in the morning or everything in the evening. I don't sort out.
Yeah,
an
you
hour.
should. I'd probably give it at least an hour post B12.
Okay. Oh
I
dear.
mean, like some people, what they say they'll actually do, for the B12 lozenges is if they don't have any other medication that they take first thing in the morning, they'll take it then.
Yeah, I take
And eat.
Synthroid. I take
Yeah.
Synthroid, so whatever.
Oh, so you got all sorts of immune things going on, don't you?
I do.
See, I didn't know this about you.
Mike has his hand up.
Mike, you awake?
Sort of. I just wanted to know, well, I mean, first off, B12, why would somebody get a test? As far as I know, I've never been tested for B12. What would cause a doctor to look at you and say, or look at your whatever, your records or whatever and say, oh, you should get a B12 test?
Unfortunately, Mike, not a hell of a lot. And this is one of the problems with certain types of medical practices. The American Association for Family Physicians flatly says a B12 test should be part of anybody's annual blood work. They say you should, it should be standard just the same way a chem panel and cholesterol testing and stuff like, and complete blood counts. What might tip somebody off, because this is definitely one of the symptoms of B12 malabsorption, is if you start showing signs of a microcytic anemia, meaning not only do you not have good iron levels in the blood, but your red blood cells on the complete blood count are smaller than they should be, because B12 deficiency can certainly lead to that. But you're right in the sense that it's not the type of thing that your overworked, harried PCP is necessarily going to think of unless you tell them. Yeah, you can see why I'm hell on doctors, right?
So if I look through my blood work over the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, what kind of test would I be looking for that would have B12 in it?
Well, if they haven't taken a B12 serum level, take a look in your complete blood count at your iron levels and also take a look at your mean corpuscular volume. See if that is low. Also see how your red blood cell count is, although that's not as direct a measure. But again, I mean, those of us here, all of us here, I believe, are what they call of a certain age. And, B12, when you go for your annual blood workup, or even more frequently, a B12 test should be part of that.
Mine always has been. And that's what he just started back at the first one that I had in my portal.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been having those you see, I guess the question is, you were having those B12 tests and it was going down over time, and nobody said anything.
Well, the primary care physician didn't, because it was always at the very end of the normal range according to that. And he explained that you need to look at it differently for peripheral neuropathy.
So I'm looking at my CBC, complete blood count. Would that have something in it that tells me?
Yeah, look for something that says MCV there, mean corpuscular volume.
And it's normal, middle of normal.
Okay.
What's the number?
The middle of my MTZ is 88. The range is 79 to 101.
Yeah, it's usually somewhere in like the 80 to 100 for the range for that. So that seems to be okay. There's no direct sign of it, but there's, the next time you go in, Mike, ask them for a B12. I mean, it's not a big deal. Well,
All right, we got 5 minutes with Pat. You want to? You said you'd stop talking, and you've talked for 30 minutes, Pat.
I did not. Glenn and Mike
yeah,
had.
it's mostly me.
Does anyone else have a question? I want to ask Glenn a question. You know, we talk about limits all the time on blood work. Who determines the limits of, you know, a range of what it should be and what it shouldn't be? How is that determined?
It's usually done like many other things, mostly on college students. And what they do is they try and take in medical research departments huge numbers of people who either volunteer or are given a little bit of a stipend to have these values set up. And they basically set those norms at the 95th percentiles, you know, 5th and 95th, just so they catch the great majority of the population. But I'm not going to say that that's always the best way to do it. And with time, and especially with drug company influence, you will see these things change. And I'll give you two very pertinent examples for us. They used to say that you were not diabetic until you had an A1C of 7.
Correct.
And then that was reduced to 6.5.
Right.
Okay, if you're above 6.5, then you were diabetic.
Right.
Cholesterol levels. It used to say, okay, under 240, you're good. Then when they started breaking it down into LDL and HDL, they said total under 220, you're good. Now it's under 200.
Yeah.
Now things do get revised, you know, as more research comes to light, but particularly in the case of cholesterol, I think a lot of that was driven by drug companies. I really do. Because the difference between somebody with a 200 level and a 240 in terms of how many like heart attacks they have is minuscule. You're talking about fractions of decimals of percents. Now, yeah, people with cholesterol levels in the 500s need intervention.
Oh,
And
sure.
some people have that hereditarily, you know, without even diet contributing. But yeah, I mean, you know, and I talk about this with my PCPs and my specialists all the time. And I happen to know something about this where I say, like, okay, so like, what did you think when they like lowered this range and you started seeing it on the lab reports? And a lot of them are very quizzical when you bring that up because it's not generally something that they would have thought to do. But you do have to be careful with people who just look at the results and, you know, just look at them as snapshots. The patterns are often more important, as Pat has sort of indicated. The one that I think about also, because my brother was involved with this, prostate specific antigen for males.
For sure.
Where unfortunately two things happen. One, they do not actually, except in really, really specialized labs, adjust those ranges for age. Okay, usually they just give the range of between 0 and 4, which is fine. But the average person in their 60s, 65, since you know, benign prostatic hyperplasia is so common, is gonna have some sort of range in the middle there, depending upon how much they suffer from it. You can have a PSA of 3 at like 65, 70 years old, and it can be very normal. What they really need to do to look at that is whether or not the velocity, the rise is rapid. And they also need to look at some of the breakdowns. You can get specialized tests for PSA that breaks down the antigens into subcomponents, some of which are more associated with prostate cancer than others.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I mean, it's when you start getting into like lab results, you know, again, this is one of those things you can get down an enormous rabbit hole very quickly. But sometimes you need to do that. And I'll tell you my wife's story to show why. My wife went to a gynecological appointment and turned up with a high level of something called alpha fetal protein. Now, alpha fetal protein is produced two ways. One in the liver, and high levels there tend to indicate liver damage. But also, it can be a component of gynecological cancers, particularly ovarian.
Mm.
And when this result came back, all sorts of craziness ensued where we had consults at Memorial Sloan Kettering and other places like that. But because no other markers were coming back, Glenn being Glenn went and delved very deep into the research and uncovered that there is a hereditary condition of higher production of alpha fetoprotein, right in the range where my wife's numbers were coming up, which was just somewhat elevated, that is well known to occur among people of Mediterranean descent. My wife is Italian. And I brought this up, and they didn't know about it at Memorial Sloan Kettering, but fortunately, Dr. Arnold Wegg, who is one of the best gastroenterologists in the city of New York, knew about this and ordered a specialized test to see where it was coming from. There was a chemical breakdown that they could do that was indicating, yes, this was being produced in her liver and it was normal. And so she did not wind up with exploratory gynecological surgery.
Well, that's
Wow.
great. Woo.
Goodness.
Well,
But you
I've
see-
got 4:30, Pat, and
Okey doke.
I think we should again thank you, Glenn, for being here.
Amen.
Amen. And I learned a lot and took a lot of notes. And
I hope the shoe and foot care presentation was well received. We'll look at the exit survey and see what people thought, for sure. Make sure.
okay, well, I'm signing off, and I hope you all have a good summer when it starts. And we have our next meeting on July 6th, correct?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, we do have a hand raised though now.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not. The person who has their name as PC 45 4563, would you unmute if you have a question? I don't think so. I think they've been inactive the whole meeting.
It's like, who is that person?
Exactly. I wish people would rename themselves so we could call them something. Hey, Glenn, one quick question. What should the homocysteine be about if I go back and look?
I can look up the ranges for you because I don't have those memorized, but generally you're looking for something in the middle of that range.
Okay.
The methylomaic acid, the idea is that what you don't want that to be is very low.
Okay.
Because again, it's a metabolic process of the usage of B12.
Okay.
But I definitely say, Pat, with 284, you're deficient. Do the sublinguals for some months, get retested. Don't be surprised if it's much higher.
Okay.
It might well be, but it'll be interesting to see, and it'll take a while, whether the symptoms you're talking about in your hands do reduce.
Right. I'm scheduled for an EMG, which I don't want to do, but I will, to rule out carpal tunnel. I'm sure it's PN.
Yeah. But I'm glad you're doing it anyway for a lot of other reasons, not the least of which is, people who are deficient for a long time in B12 often do show those dementia-like symptoms. And that you don't want to put people through that for something that's really easy to handle.
Sure. Excellent. Thank you. He didn't mention that at all. All right. Thank you, Bill, for great moderation. Mike looks like he's on the phone. Hello.
And Peter looks very comfortable, and
thank you
for that grandson.
Yeah. Where are those grandkids?
Thank
you for
Pat.
sharing your heel. I was glad I could spotlight it so we could see that counts.
Okay, thank you.
All right, folks.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Y'all take care.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Okay.
Oh, did anybody save the chat?
Good question.
Darn it.
I don't remember it being asked.
Can we save the chat?
That's what I'm going to look right now and see.
I'm looking to see if I have that.
Usually you have the ellipse and there isn't one. I don't understand. Sometimes I can save it and sometimes I can't.
Yeah, I'm not getting that either. I have the chat up and I have the chat. I'm trying to get the rest of that menu,
Me
but
too.
I'm not getting it.
I don't get it. Why can I do it most times? And I'm the host, so I should be able to.
Yeah, I would think so.
Let's see what happens when you put file. I'm going to put it in your computer just in case that might do it. I don't know.
Yeah, because I believe if you have that privilege, host privilege, you're supposed to be able to do that and save it to a file in the computer.
Yes, that's what I'm trying for. So let's see where I could put it. Desktop. And then I'll go back and figure it out. I'm going to try that. I don't know if it's going to work or not. Nope.
I down at the bottom, I said save chat. The three.
Oh, you got it?
icons. It's the three icons that would go to chat.
Well, I don't have that.
You don't have chat?
I
No,
don't.
I don't have the option to with the ellipse with the three dots. I can't save
Yeah,
it.
the three dots are in the bottom of mine.
Would you please make sure you save it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I may come back to you and say, whoops, can you share it with me because I didn't save it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. See, I wonder why that is, because I didn't have the save chat choice either.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it has to do with the version of Zoom I have.
Hello? Yeah.
I was thinking.
I haven't had a chance. I'm on a Zoom meeting. I'm getting off in a few minutes. I'll call you back if I get a hold of you.
Okay.
So, Mike, happy birthday.
Oh.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Mike, it's his birthday. I didn't realize.
Okay. You're gonna. Okay, well, drop by and let me know what's going on because I don't think he wants to see me there. So I'll take it from you. Whatever happens, you let me know.
See, the end of every support group meeting ever.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me know, Steve. You too now. Take care. Bye.
Talking to me? Are you still talking to your support? Oh, see, and Mike is gone, and I didn't even get to put up a cake emoji.
Did you say it was Mike Foxworth's birthday?
Yeah, Mike put into the chat just now, it's my birthday and getting calls from relatives. And I'm like, oh, we didn't know it was his birthday.
Okay, I'm going to try to copy because I thought he could save it as the co-host, maybe, but I couldn't. Judd will be disappointed in us for not being able to do it.
I suspect, given what's going on with Judd, he'll give us a pass.
Yeah, I know, but it makes me mad when I can't figure out stuff that I should by this point know, I would think, but I got the agenda up. I mean, that was something. Well, I tried copying and pasting and it only copied the very first line. Darn it.
Okay, I at least got a birthday cake into the chat.
Oh, good. Well, pooey. Wonder if I could save it on my phone.
See, now I see Mike's dog, but Mike has gone.
I'm going to try opening it on the phone and see if I can get it that way. Oh, because of the situation with Judd, are you still on, Glenn?
Yeah.
We are only now going to send out the reminder for the June 25th meeting on Monday when he comes back.
That's okay though, because I mean, closer to it is probably better anyway.
Yeah.
And there are people I want to drag into this one, even if they're not specifically support group leaders.
Yeah.
There are people who, in fact, I was thinking about trying to browbeat into getting onto the WNA board, which I'm so good at, where I'd like to try and see if I can get them to come too, because there are people who, you know, like some of the people we met today who are very active in one way or another, particularly like Samantha Fields from the Colorado group, comes to some of our groups as well, you know, and does a lot of advocacy work out there.
Okay, so on Monday, what I'll do is we have a list of 23. I can't figure out how to say this. I give up. We have a list of 23 that we were going to send it to, and we'll go from there. And you can add, I'll send you the list and you can add whoever else you don't, like this Samantha Fields. And you know, the thing that struck me when Rob was talking first at the beginning, he mentioned that he had gone to a support group in State College at some hospital. And I said, I don't know anything about a support group at State College. Do you?
No, and I imagine that there are probably some support groups out there, particularly live in-person ones, that we're just not aware of,
Right.
and that sort of operate on their own. You know, I think your listing now, Pat, at PNSN is somewhat more comprehensive than the one at FPN, although the FPN one was a little bit revised, I noticed.
Oh, yes. Okay. That's a
You
good
know, and
to
well,
cross-check.
yeah, part of it, I think, was because apparently the new person there who's the director of communications, April, is not jaded yet and reached out to some people
It's
because
not
Deanna,
what yet?
she's not jaded yet. Deanna Munzert actually tells me she's got a meeting with her this coming week.
Oh,
So that'll be interesting.
that will be interesting. Okay.
But
I am visiting my sister, so I am going to get off and have a nice dinner and a nice visit. And thank you all for coming. And we won't worry about, is there important stuff in the chat? Darn it. I'm wondering,
there's some important stuff. There's not a lot of
wondering
craziness there.
could we take screenshot of,
Well, but then you only get pieces of it.
I know, I mean, even if it were in pieces, it would be better than not having it. Though I guess the answer is for Peter to send what he was able to save.
Yeah, I guess just, if you have it, Peter, kick it over to Pat.
I just found it.
Oh, you did?
It's at the top today for some reason. Holy cow. All right, it looks like it's saved. Thank you.
See, now I'm looking for it now because if you said it was at the top.
It was at the top across from Peripheral Neuropathy Support Network. Maybe because I was host. I don't know. Yeah. All right, I have to go. Cheerio,
Okay.
everyone. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
take care.
Do the exit.